Well, let me set the context for the video. If you've ever wondered what the term agent means, what exactly does it mean to build a terminal agent? How does Claude Code, Codex, 𝗟 work under the hood? And what exactly is an agent harness? This video is for you. This is a 2.5 hour first Super 30 class in which we understand what exactly an agent loop is and how do you build a coding agent like Claude Code. We understand the various approaches, we understand how various terminal UIs work, and we specifically dive into the code base of 𝗟.dev and try to clone it from scratch. 𝗟 is an open source terminal based coding harness that recently got very popular. It ranks 6th or 7th on terminal bench. It's actually very simple, minimal, and what you would want a very minimalistic agent to be. And surprisingly, irrespective of it being simple, it performs astonishingly well. The video is fairly slow paced. It has slides. There is code that I'll attach in the description as well. I'd urge if you have 2 to 3 hours together to sit down and go through the video, you should. And by the end, you should have crystal clarity on how you build an agent, and specifically how do you build one variation of it, which is a terminal based coding agent. This video is part of Super 30, an on-site batch I run in Noida. If you want to join its online version and get access to these recordings, videos, WhatsApp groups and doubt sessions, feel free to join with the link in the description. Without any further ado, let's get right into it.
All right, पीछे आवाज आ रही है? पीछे. Cool. AI start करते हैं guys. कितने लोगों ने Codex? How many of us are comfortable? कि कर लिया है या कर लेंगे? कर लिया, कर लेंगे. ठीक है. Cool. ठीक है, कर लेना भाई. मतलब take 2 more weeks is totally fine. Very what's the right word for it? Important niche new skill to know. A lot of companies would, I would assume basically if you're looking for a easy hire, as in the interview goes really well, or bulk of companies जहाँ चीज़ें पूछेंगी ये पूछेंगी, मैं भी सीख ही रहा हूँ. मतलब this is all new to almost everyone, all 6-month-old concepts. Terminal coding agents came up like 8 महीने पहले. Claude Code से start हुआ था. आवाज़ आ रही है क्या पीछे? Claude Code से start हुआ था, and now there are many. I don't know how many of you guys have seen the revenues of Claude Code, or if you actively code in a company, you know for a fact that you're mostly only using Claude Code now. You're not even using Cursor. Everyone is coding inside a terminal agent. How does it work under the hood is one thing we'll discuss. We'll start from the basics though. We'll understand, agents होते क्या हैं, what are agents, how do they work, so on and so forth. Has anyone gone through the code base of 𝗟? 1, 2. नहीं. Or Claude Code or Codex. Which one? Claude Code. Claude Code is not open source. Huh?
Are you sure?
It's like weirdly open source, but okay. Were you able to understand Claude Code? I was not. Claude Code has a very complicated, extremely obviously vibe coded code base. Codex is written in Rust. It is also mildly vibe coded, but जितना Rust हमने सीखा है, you need to know more Rust for you to be able to even comprehend the Codex ka code base. 1, because it's written in Rust. 2, because it's a very complicated harness compared to Terminus and 𝗟, which are very simple harnesses. Very simple, एकदम basic coding harnesses हैं. Have you guys heard of terminal bench, which is like a benchmark? नहीं आ रही ना? तो मैं सोचूं कैसे? Hello. Oh. Hello. Oh. Hello. कुछ issue है? Okay, my bad. Hello. All right. Good. What I was saying was, Terminus 𝗟 very simple coding agents. Terminus is basically एक AI को एक tmux का access area, एक terminal का access area. There is nothing else. This, as we read through 𝗟, we'll see it's a very simple code base. Claude Code, Codex, very complicated code bases. What do you think performs well on Terminal Bench, which is a benchmark for benchmarking these terminal agents? Benchmark सबको समझ आते हैं? Have you heard of SWE bench? What is SWE bench? Bits Pilani?
It's a big model का benchmark.
क्या benchmark करता है वो?
कितना performance?
किस चीज़ की performance?
Software engineer से कितना better है?
हाँ. It basically.
मतलब हर बहुत सारे पैरामीटर.
नहीं, हाँ, yes, but mostly it benchmarks on coding. कि अगर coding करनी है, तो which model is performing the best? Be it Claude, whatever, OpenAI, so on and so forth. Do you guys know of a new benchmark, a long SWE benchmark जो भी recently आया? There's another benchmark that recently came. That's SWE long or something. I forgot the name. That's a slightly better benchmark for can a terminal agent do coding tasks or not. Benchmarks are basically एक तरफ कंपनीज मॉडल्स बना रही हैं, ऑन वन साइड कंपनीज आर मेकिंग मॉडल्स, ऑन द अदर साइड देयर आर another set of companies that make benchmarks, which basically means they write a bunch of evals, if you know what evals are, or tests, and then they test the model against it, and then they benchmark, okay, you know, which model is performing the best on these tests. So if you look at 𝗟𝗶𝗀𝘀, it shows you, you know, the leaderboard of all models. Claude Opus 4.5 is able to do 78% of the tasks at an average cost of 75 cents per task. Gemini 3 Flash is able to do 78.8, so on and so forth. So it benchmarks these, you know, models. Companies also highly optimize for this. मतलब जो model labs हैं, all these labs optimize to get above these models. Whenever they have a new release, they will always announce that we were able to perform 10% better on 𝗟𝗶𝗀𝘀 benchmark. ऐसे there are many benchmarks. One benchmark is for coding agents or terminal agents called the terminal benchmark. What do you think performs better in it? Is it a simplest terminal agent which talks to an AI and gives AI access to a bash कि जो करना है कर लो? Or is it a highly optimized multi-agent system like Claude Code जिसका कोड बेस भी नहीं पढ़ा जा रहा है, सिंपल एजेंट लूप नहीं है, वेरी कॉम्प्लिकेटेड, अंदर क्या हो रहा है, 10 चीज़ें हो रही हैं, it does, you know, whatever, it does memory, it does sub agent orchestration. If you give it a task कि fix this PR, fix this issue on GitHub, it does a very complicated workflow compared to a simple workflow of जो Terminus या PyDev करता है कि it gives the issue to the LLM. The LLM asks to read the issue. It reads the issue. The LLM reads a bunch of files. धीरे धीरे LLM खुद explore करता है. There are two ways. One, you only talk to an LLM. LLM धीरे धीरे आपका code base explore कर रहा है खुद से from the best of its abilities. कि if you know, if you are a developer and I give you a task today, what will you do? You will सबसे पहले open the project. You will go through the README. Then you will try to find अच्छा ये जो issue है probably exists in this file. So you will search for, if the issue is fixed authentication, you will search for auth.ts. You will search for user.ts. And the LLM surprisingly does something similar. If you give it a task, it does a read file tool call कि हाँ मुझे auth.ts नाम की कोई फाइल है, let me read that. Reads the contents, tries to figure it out. The other thing is Claude Code, which, you know, would probably do something like this. You give it an issue, it will spawn a sub-agent. The first sub-agent's task is to just read the issue from GitHub. It reads it, returns the context. Then it will spawn another sub-issue to read all the files and summarize. Then it will spawn another agent to, you know, जो files read हुई हैं उसमें से probably figure out the best context. Then it will start to fix the issue. Then it will start a write agent that writes the issue. There's a lot of sub agents running. Which one do you think should perform better? Second one, मतलब Claude Code should perform better. You know, इतना उन्होंने optimizations की है. It doesn't. Terminus is number 1 on terminal bench, and these guys are also pretty up there. Pi.dev are very competing with Codex and Claude Code. Surprisingly, models have been trained so well to, you know, on the bash tool, specifically on bash or specifically on जो commands हम terminal में run करते हैं, the commands that we run, that it's actually very smart if you just give it access to the file system. You know, if you tell it कि ये issue fix करना है इस file system में, खुद ही explore कर लेता है. It is able to explore the code base itself really well because the models have been trained really well now. The harness matters less and less. The orchestration layer, the terminal UI that you have matters less and less now compared to, you know, what optimizations you can do there. We'll see all of this, and you know, that's the project that we have to build. We'll start off with a bunch of jargon. I'm assuming LLMs, system prompts, tokens, सबको पता है. I'll still go through it. Tools might be one thing some of you don't know. What is an agent exactly? How is it different from a ChatGPT UI? You know, what is an assistant versus what is an agent versus what is an LLM call, जो हम normal LLM call करते हैं. Difference between conversational UIs and coding agents, provider APIs and Pi. ये सब है. Pi is a very simple project that you can read through. It has probably less than 2,000, 3,000 lines of code जो आपको समझनी है. It's written in TypeScript, which I'm assuming all of you are comfortable with. And it's the most simplest coding agent you can think of. It also performs really well. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि if it's simple तो it's not performing well. It is simple, it also performs well. And if you want to ever learn, you know, how terminal agents or coding agents are built, this is a very nice code base to look at. They expose the agent independently, and if you have heard of OpenClaw, अगर आप लोगों को OpenClaw याद है, OpenClaw now uses Pi as its agent layer. तो इनका the agent that they have exposed, on top of which they have built their coding agent, the same agent is used by Claude Code now, which, you know, tells you कि they have built a very simple, nice, minimal coding agent. Agent कह लो या agent loop कह लो. LangChain सबने सुना है? LangChain, LangGraph. They sort of try to solve this problem. They, you know, try to create abstractions around the term agent. V0.dev अगर सुना हो, you know, they make it very easy to connect. Sorry, not V0.dev, my bad. Versal AI SDK. Versal AI SDK makes it very easy to talk to LLMs. A lot of such abstractions were created. Pi doesn't use any. Pi has written everything from scratch, and assume if you're joining a company, most companies are also writing these themselves. The orchestration layer, the agent layer is written themselves. Not a lot of people are using LangChain, so there's not a lot of merit to learning it right now. It is a good thing, it makes your life very easy, so does the virtual AI SDK, but assume if you're joining a company or if you're interviewing for one, they would want to know कि अंदर क्या हो रहा है. You can't simply initialize a new agent class and go for it. They expect you to write the agent from scratch. Hence, we need to understand, how do you write an agent. Cool. Let's go into these one by one. The simplest jargon, I won't spend too much time here, but what is an LLM? It's a large language model. It is a type of AI assistant trained on massive amount of data, text data to understand and generate human language. That's a large language model. Is this statement completely true though? It's a type of AI assistant trained on massive amount of text data to understand and generate human language and text. Or can LLMs do other things?
It's a multimodal. Basically, they train on multiple sources of data.
Correct. It does train on images as well. It trains on voice as well. A lot of models, if you've seen GPT real time, it is actually trained on voice, which means the model takes the voice as input and sometimes outputs voice as an output. It can take voice and text as input, voice and text and images as input, and can still output, voice or text. So models can be trained on various types of modalities. Text is the most simplest one that we sort of, deal with. The model reads billions of pages of text, learns patterns, how words, sentences, ideas relate to each other. Assume if there is any model by a big lab right now, it has basically scraped the full internet. The data has sort of been exhausted. All the data that you can currently scrape from Google, from the internet, every website that exists, assume Wikipedia, Reddit, has been scraped by them and the model has been trained on them. In fact, one of the biggest things that companies are struggling with right now is more data. The labs, if they want to move beyond this, now they're competing with each other and everyone is able to reach a point. They can either increase the model size or they need to get more data. They've exhausted the data that exists on the internet, which was the easiest low-hanging fruit, the easiest way to find data. What do you think is the next step? How are they now gathering more data? Does anyone know? AI-generated data. Or? What was that? Session-based? Huh? Okay, what you're mentioning is RLHF, के user से सीख के उसको better करते हैं. I'm just saying data कहाँ से नया बन रहा है? If data has been exhausted, more data is being added to the internet. There is no new news that comes out. There are more blog posts that come. There are more Reddit posts that come. But other than that, how are AI labs getting data? Synthetic data. Basically, a lot of labelers are sitting all around the world and creating data. If you've heard of a Scale AI or a Mercor, this is exactly what they do. Mercor, which one of the fastest growing companies, youngest founder, billionaire. Scale AI started by someone who was 17, exited to Meta for $25 billion. Both of these companies do this only. They hire a lot of Indian, Bangladeshi, Nigerian people. They give them a lot of labeling data, और वहाँ पे coder बैठ के data label कर रहा होता है, so that these labs can make money. These labs also offer up to $50,000 per private code basis. So if you have a private code base that's not on the internet right now, you can sell it to them for up to $50,000, because if it's a complex enough code base and their LLM can learn from it, they will pay for it. Right now, that's how they're gathering more and more data. Most model LLMs are built on the transformer architecture. We're not going deeper into this. Rishabh has covered this in the cohort if someone is curious. You can be asked this. Manav करके लड़का था पिछले Super 30 में. He interviewed at a YC company. They simply started to dive into the transformer architecture. May or may not help. Try to do it 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. If you don't understand it, leave it. If you do understand it by the 4th time, then probably go deeper and understand, how does an LLM, this specific architecture, transformers, how do they work under the hood? Which uses a mechanics called attention to understand the context of long searches of text. Again, all of this is sort of nice and important to know, transformers and attention. People can ask you this. Most companies, the ones that you'll get probably hired from here, you will not work at the model layer. That's like a very researchy thing you need a PhD to do. But always good to know how this works under the hood. उस बंदे के साथ क्या हुआ था मानव के साथ? They asked him to open ChatGPT and ask for what attention is, and as it started to spit things out, he had to explain whatever he understood from ChatGPT. So assume that kind of a question can be asked. We also hopefully know that LLMs generate 1 token at a time. So if you ask it something like what the capital of India is, it's going to say Delhi 1 token. Think of this as a very good compression algorithm. This has compressed all the data on the internet. 8 billion parameter, 16 billion parameter model is just a bunch of parameters that have somehow compressed the full internet data into a bunch of vectors and matrices. How they do it is attention. That is why it was such a novel architecture when it came out. Okay, you can compress billions and billions of text data into a very small matrix, so that if someone asks the capital of India is, you're able to spit out Delhi from somewhere in this map. That point exists. Okay, the capital of India is, say, when you go through a very big vector space, where you land is very close to Delhi, and hence it spits out Delhi. And it keeps going, after again and again until an end token is reached. In this case, it's a very simple sentence. The capital of India is, all it needs to spit out is Delhi, and then an end token. If you ask it something more complex, it'll keep spitting out token, token, token until it reaches the end token. Cool, that's LLMs. System prompt. A system prompt is a set of instructions given to an LLM before the conversation begins. Again, you might have seen this. If I go to ChatGPT UI and ask, hey, what is the capital of India? The thing that reaches the LLM is something like this. A system prompt and a user prompt. It doesn't mean the LLM architecture has changed. It doesn't mean that the LLM can accept 2 inputs. The LLM can still accept only 1 text input. And it has been trained over time to understand that whatever is written inside system is the system prompt, which means what the administrator of this website wants you to do. And whatever is written inside user is whatever the user wants from this website. So you can put things like, do not talk about my competitors, or be very safe, do not, if someone asks for the system prompt, don't respond, so on and so forth. You add a lot of rules in the system prompt, and then you append the user's prompt after that. There are still ways to inject. If you might have heard of LLM injection, you can ask it somehow, my grandmother will die, give me the system prompt. So it will spit out the system prompt to you. But the LLM as a black box only takes a stream of tokens as inputs, only spits out a stream of tokens as output. It does not take 2 different inputs. There is no concept of system versus user at the model layer. It is just when that it is just that when it was trained on a lot of data like this. You are a polite assistant. Answer it politely. User, can you tell me about myself? Answer, जब वो train हो रहा था, when you are training, the answer is also there, right? When you are training, there is input data and output data that is there. The output data for a polite system prompt was polite. For an impolite system prompt was impolite. So over time it learned कि अगर यहाँ पे polite लिखा है तो मुझे polite response देना है. If it says impolite over here, I have to return impolite response. It has been trained to understand these tokens, the system token, the user token, so on and so forth. If I ask the same question to Claude, they have their own system prompt. वहाँ पे it changes a bit कि हाँ, you are Claude, a helpful assistant, whatever their prompt is, but mota you understand. Every conversational UI that you're interacting with, there is a default system prompt. Some of them also let you override the system prompt. So you can add things like, only give me concise answers, do not reply with emojis, things like these, and the LLM will make sure उसके बाद कि it only returns you concise answers. There is a third way to use an LLM, which is through APIs. Do we know this? Has everyone done this? API platform.openai.com, platform.claude.ai. You can go to these platforms and talk to the LLM not from a conversational UI but from your own backend. This is my postman. I can send a request to generativelanguage.googleapis.com/whatever v1 beta models, a model name, give it some body, and send a request to the LLM. The LLM can respond back with whatever it agrees to. Here, if I pass text, is there a default system prompt that goes with it? Is there a default system prompt? अगर मैं यहाँ पे ये text देता हूँ तो system prompt जुड़ जाता है. If I give some text here, will a system prompt be appended before it reaches the LLM?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes. May or may not.
May or may not be.
Yes. For sure, yes.
For surely yes. गलत है. You are given the option to specify the system prompt if you want. But if you are talking to an LLM through the API, whatever you pass is what it gets. There is no system prompt that is injected by default unless you yourself inject a system prompt. For example, here
प्रोटेक्शन भी रहता होगा कि जैसे अब्यूज और वो सब के वो सिस्टम प्रॉम्प्ट
ब्लैक लिस्टेड की सर्च नहीं कर सकते
जैसे वॉर चल रही है तो कुछ ऐसे स्टेटमेंट्स मत देना किसी इसमें कुछ
ओपनए की तरफ से एक प्रॉम्प्ट आता होगा
हो सकता है.
मेरी सिक्योरिटी मत
very possible.
गार्डरेल्स
There might be some guardrails.
पोस्ट प्रोसेसिंग में जो प्रॉम्प्ट एक उनका मास्टर प्रॉम्प्ट होता होगा ना कि जैसे कि कोई भी बॉम्ब वाला या ऐसे उनका होता होगा और एक हमारा है कि हम जो सिस्टम प्रॉम्प्ट देते हैं हमारे सिनेरियो में.
Correct. I agree. There is one thing which is the system prompt. There is a level of pre-processing that happens on your prompt before. Before your prompt reaches here, it goes through something, some sort of a guardrail to ensure आपने bomb के बारे में तो नहीं पूछा हुआ है. आप whatever you're not asking something bad. If there is, वो LLM से पहुंचने से पहले एक SLM से बात होगी, एक छोटे language model से बात होगी. The small language model will tell कि whatever you're passing is something we don't support, so it will just reject the request early. If you go to Claude today and you try to, have you guys heard कि Claude Code has a lot of war with OpenCode? Claude Code has a $200 subscription. If you take the $200 subscription, they give you massive, credits. आप बहुत ज़्यादा use कर सकते हो. What people do is they buy the $200 subscription, they start to use it through Pi or use it through, other open source models like OpenCode, other open source harnesses like OpenCode. So do you guys know OpenCode और Claude Code में बहुत लड़ाई होती है बीच में, है ना? Claude Code की $200 subscription है. They are subsidizing your subscription because they want you to use Claude Code. What you do is you get the Claude Code subscription. You start to use Anthropic tokens through Pi or through OpenCode, which is bad. So now they started rejecting it. If they detect a request from OpenCode, they reject it. That also doesn't happen at the model layer. They haven't retrained their model कि अगर OpenCode mentioned है, if OpenCode is mentioned, return. No. They have a layer before this, the guardrails वाली layer. If you send a request to, if you bought Claude Max plan, and if you send a request where in the system prompt anywhere OpenCode is mentioned, they पहले ही reject your request. So the system prompt technically would be empty. Would there be guardrails? Yes. The models are also trained on guardrails कि bomb के बारे में नहीं respond करता है, it doesn't have that data. But there are guardrails before this also. कि if you ask something bad, it won't happen. Technically, is the system prompt there? Though no. Is there a system prompt here now? Yes. The system prompt says you're a Spanish teacher, return everything in Spanish. So the final thing that reaches the LLM is something like this. You're a Spanish lesson teacher, answer everything in Spanish, followed by the user message. What you get back is a Spanish message, which sort of tells you that the system prompt actually reached the error. Cool. Any questions?
I have configured Pi with the OpenAI auth, and I just asked the prompt that which AI are you. तो बता रहे I am ChatGPT and I am using the Pi coding agent.
So ChatGPT hasn't blocked you. Yes. In your system prompt, if you look at Pi system prompt, it says I am Pi the coding agent. That system prompt reaches ChatGPT. ChatGPT doesn't care. You have Codex subscription and you're using Pi with it.
Yes. Like,
or you.
OAuth on ChatGPT.
Yes. So they have that provider. Thankfully, they're not blocked yet. Generally, OpenAI doesn't block people. Try the same with Claude. Might work, might not work. OpenCode में if you try, 100% will not work. They sort of block OpenCode. And Claude Code, मतलब जो Claude Code, Clawbot जो था, that is also blocked by the. And now they have two different subscriptions. If you do take Claude का $200 plan, they give you $100 of credits on the other side. This is your $100 credits for other apps. So they start to debit that.
How much of the studying traditional machine learning is like kind of worth it with time comparison? मतलब कितना traditional machine learning यहाँ पे आने से पहले make sense ये फायदा होगा?
इससे पहले?
LLM से पहले like
अच्छा, you saying
neural networks
before you learn transformers, how much classical machine learning helps? यही पूछ रहे हो?
Cracking the interview kind of will it be eventually helpful?
For an interview, most companies will not ask you. Some company might ask you transformer architecture. I don't think it makes sense for you to learn classical machine learning first. कि आप gradient descent, neural network ये सब पढ़ो. But the basics learn. What is a neural network? What are gradient descents? What is a loss function? How language models were created before attention. If you've heard of LSTMs or RNNs, these सबसे पहले they were neural networks, then they were RNNs, then there was LSTMs, and then came attention. So there are 4 variations of language models that we have tried. Attention just ended up becoming great. Do you?
High level sort of.
मतलब हाँ. I mean yes and no. मतलब जैसे मुझे कोई इंटरव्यू में पूछेगा तो मैं पहुँचते पहुँच जाऊँगा. I've learned LSTMs back in the day. तो कहीं ना कहीं मुझे याद है they retain state. I have learned neural networks, so a very simple thing to easy to explain. Most of the times, I mean, for your own foundation, it might help. I doubt in a company interview they'll be like, let's go into the history of LSTMs and explain me that. I think they'll be simply like, attention समझ आता है नहीं आता है तो explain me the internals of attention. What is KB? What is KB cache?
Basically, attention is all in it paper.
If you understand that you're more than good, you don't have to. Most people don't have to learn that paper, but if you can understand it, it's great. There are a few ways to learn it. खुद पढ़ लो, very difficult, at least for me. 3 Blue 1 Brown has 10 videos on it. उससे मुझे थोड़ा चमका था. Rishabh has videos on it, or when Rishabh is here, just bug his head. That's how I've actually learned it, by talking a lot to Rishabh. What was that?
Deep learning AI.
Deep learning AI paper.
There's a platform.
There's a platform, deeplearning.ai. Oh,
Visualization.
just post all the links if you guys do want to learn attention. Feel free to, probably a good thing, and we'll share some links.
So yeah, Chinese companies are reselling this 𝗟𝗶H Pro and Claude API, and you can use it for $1, and you can use like multi-million tokens. How do they are doing?
Same thing, right? So I mean, there are a bunch of ways to do it. You can actually do an enterprise deal with ChatGPT. You can tell them, "Okay, I will consume $20 million worth of credits in this year. Give it to me in $5 million." They will give it to you. This is a very old business. You do that with cloud providers also. You go to AWS, you give them 5 CR upfront, they give you 20 CR of credits. क्योंकि उनको चलो एक बारी में 5 CR आ रहा है, and for the next 1 year, this person is allowed to use 20 CR, and then they resell it again. You get 20 CR of credits, you sell it to 5 different companies for 20 CR है तो you divide it into 4 CR के 5 batches, and you sell it to 5 different companies. You only paid 5 CR to AWS, you resold it आगे for a little bit of a kicker. इसमें downside क्या है? You have done the commitment to the cloud provider, or in this case AWS. If you're not able to find customers, your money is gone. They have given you 20 CR worth of credits. If you're not able to use those credits in a year, that money is gone, which is why it's a slightly risky business. कि you upfront commit to AWS, they are okay कि चलो हमें upfront 5 CR मिल रहे हैं, they give you slightly better commitment, you resell it. That is one way to do it. I don't think that's how Chinese providers are doing it. I think the way they do it is, they have bought a $200 plan, which gives you generous 20 times more context or 20 times more tokens, and then they just are reselling it various ways. But the better way to do it, I mean, Open Router, if you've heard of it, or Versal AI Gateway अगर सुना है, you give them $100, they give you $100 worth of, whatever, cloud credits you can route. So it's always a curious question as to how do they make money. Open Router has a 5% kicker on top of you give them $20, they let you use only $19.5 of worth of credits. But actually how Open Router makes money is it has enterprise deals with everyone. And you give them $20, but उनको वो token $10 का ही पड़ता है आगे, because they bulk commit to AWS, to whatever, Google Cloud, so on and so forth. Any more questions?
So when we are using any model, right? Let's say ChatGPT में कोई भी model use कर रहे हैं. Like, how do we know that what we are using is like, let's say we select 5.5 or 5.4, whatever.
You can't. You can ask it.
How do we know कि वही model है? Like, is there
Again.
this model we are using, because they can subscribe to any model and we are not sure.
Any company can do that. If you go to Manus, if you go to AI Fiesta and you select a specific model, there is no guarantee. You can of course confirm, उससे पूछ लो, what model are you, and it might return you something, but that's always not trustable. Sometimes someone has a, जैसे Kimi करके model है, and you ask it, who are you, it might return you DeepSeek, because it might have been, trained on top of the open source DeepSeek model. So it's not necessary कि वो गलत है. Kutum आया था बीच में, if you remember. Kutum was Ola created an LLM model, right, in India. Kutrim, sorry, whatever the name is. So people started to ask it, it started to, return I'm Llama, because it is of course built on top of Llama. No one is training models from scratch, right? If someone has already spent $10 million training DeepSeek 8 billion, so you will train on top of it. You will of course not start from scratch and वहाँ तक पहुँचोगे 10 million लगा के उससे आगे जाओगे. Everyone starts now from Llama or from DeepSeek and then trains on top of it. Hence, if you ask it and it returns you a bad thing, you still can't tell. They might have guardrails in front. If the user asks what model I am, return GPT 5.5. There probably might be a cryptographic signature way to verify. I don't think that is exposed by any of these guys. More questions? No questions? All right. Cool. So we understand system prompt. Tokens. Streaming versus one shot.
Codex, Claude Code cannot go to Codex because system prompts हैं, कोई पे Codex आ गया ना, OpenCode या OpenAI का नाम आएगा तो नहीं भेजता. पर हम लोग Claude या speed ऐसे कल कमांड भी भेज सकते हैं. उस केस में डायरेक्ट तो नहीं चल पाएगा.
Do you want to use Claude Code inside Codex? Your Claude Code subscription inside Codex?
क्योंकि system prompts से OpenAI का कुछ नाम आएगा तो Claude Code रिजेक्ट करेगा.
वो exactly word थोड़ी मैच करते हैं.
नहीं वो ये करते हैं वैसे. They actually match the word.
But हम ऐसे API request, curl request अगर भेजें.
If you send a curl request.
तो उसको तो डायरेक्ट क्यों system prompt तो नहीं है उस time.
Okay, what you're saying is I bought a $200 subscription and I'm not using it through Claude Code. मैं उसको API के through use कर रहा हूँ. कर सकते हो. At some point they'll block it. That is another way to abuse the extra tokens that you get. I don't know why they haven't. This is like a very easily solvable problem. Okay, all requests from Claude Code should go to a proxy server where the system prompt is injected. If you do that, अगर system prompt यहाँ से नहीं जाएगा, एक proxy server से जाएगा, it's like a very solvable problem. कि the $200 credits that you have only go through the proxy server request. तो अगर आप बाहर से try करोगे तो नहीं कर पाओगे. Might be abusable right now. they have not blocked that yet. At some point, if this continues, okay, they're giving generous, limits on Claude Code and Codex Code, then yes, they will start to block that as well. नहीं तो another way to abuse, right? ये सबको समझ आया abuse करने का तरीका? Cool.
Couldn't understand since it is in Hindi.
Yeah. What you were saying was, so the thing is, there's a very big way. Twitter, if you open Twitter, you always see this battle. Okay, what Claude Code did was to capture the market. What they said was, if you buy the $20 plan, you get 1 million tokens. So if you use that for one day, it is exhausted. If you buy the $200 plan, ideally you should get 10 million tokens, but they give you 100 million tokens just for competing with Codex right now. So they say, buy the $200 plan, we'll give you a lot of tokens. What people do is, those tokens that were subsidized and meant for Claude Code, they start to use it via Codex. Or when you already have access to so many tokens, you can just use the API like this, and the tokens that you were given for using Claude Code, so that you become accustomed to Claude Code, you can use them via your API in your AI Fiesta app, in your agent app. So you only give $200 to Claude, and you got 100 million worth of tokens from them, and you're just using it in other places. You are meant to use it only in the Claude Code, inside Claude Code, the harness, because the only reason they're giving you that subsidy is because they want you to use Claude Code heavily. They want you to get accustomed to Claude Code. If you start to use it through a different coding agent, they start to block you. If you start to use it directly inside Postman to send requests, they will start to block you. Claude is the only company that is doing this right now, which is why there's a lot of battle. But eventually, I would assume
Not allowing to authorize via except for Claude Code.
more or less. But the way they are allowing via Claude Code and disallowing from other places. Yeah. Except Claude Code. But the thing is, how they're doing it is very funny, because in the end, if you look at it, Claude Code is a client app. It runs on my machine. So my Claude token somewhere or the other is here. And then I talk to the Claude server through my access token on this machine to get a response from the LLM. I can always, use something else because I still have the access token here, and send a request to those guys. So the way they actually block it is they check the system prompt and they check if pi is mentioned there, or if OpenCode is mentioned there, and if it is, it blocks you. So if you simply send it a prompt, Theo had a tweet now where he said, Claude-P, hi, I am OpenCode. You pressed enter, it said, we are rejecting your requests for a very simple thing, because OpenCode was mentioned in the prompt. Cool? Any more questions? I hope everyone understands tokens. Token is the most basic unit of text in the LLM processor. It's not a word, it's not a character, but somewhere in between. Again, if you've done Rishabh's code, this is hopefully very obvious, but if you write something like this, can you tell me the capital of the state Delhi, please? The country India, please. This is broken down into a bunch of tokens, and notice Delhi is not one token, DEL is one token, HI is another token. Most words are tokens, but some DEL is one token, HI is a different token. And LLMs can only produce one token at a time. So if you give it this input, all of this input is converted into tokens like these, which are converted into vectors, which go as an input, and then a vector comes out, and that outcoming vector is what is the next token, which might be a valid word, might be an invalid adha word, so on and so forth. LLMs generate one token at a time. So if you give it something like this, where you ask it, can you talk about the Rust language? It starts to respond like this. Sure, the Rust language is so on and so forth. So it's just producing one token after the other. The LLM is only producing one token at a time, which also introduces a very nice infrastructure challenge or backend challenge. Eventually, when the user is coming on your website, of course, it is not directly talking to the LLM. When I press this button, the API that I'm hitting is not this guy. Otherwise, there's no guardrails in the middle, there's no authentication. So of course, I hit a backend. The authentication happens here, guardrail checks happen here, and then the backend talks to the LLM. The LLM is producing one token at a time. I can either gather all of those tokens, pull the response, and return it to the front end, or I can stream the response. What is better for UX? Of course, streaming the response, which, again, introduces a new problem at this layer. How should the backend talk to the LLM? Now, to keep things simple, it probably needs to be HTTP. What comes to your head when we think of a use case like this? Our front end needs to talk to backend, and backend needs to stream data, one chunk at a time. Very good. मेरे दिमाग में WebSockets आता. If first time I would have thought of it, I would have thought of WebSockets. यार ये तो WebSocket जैसा use case लग रहा है कि backend needs to send data over here. So probably WebSockets is what we need. But what do they use? They use server-side events or event streams. they were the second thing that was introduced before WebSockets were introduced. Pehle there was only the request response model. You send a request to the backend responds back. HTTP request, client server model, if you've heard of it. You ask for a request, the server responds back. Then people realized there are use cases where the backend needs to push events to the front end, which is where server-side events came into the picture, which seems like the most obvious thing here. Then came two-way communication, which was WebSockets. Okay, the front end can keep talking to the backend can keep talking to the front end. WebSockets are a little bit of an over-engineered use case here, and hence server-side events is what most backend providers will expose. So this connection gets upgraded to a server-side event or an event stream. And then the backend talks to the LLM. You asked it this question, the system prompt gets injected. The LLM produces one token at a time, and that token is sent via event streams, one token at a time, or whatever the events are. If you look at the events, you'll find a bunch of them. For example, if you go to 𝗟𝗶PH and ask it a question, you'll see that the request that goes out is a server-side event stream. And the events, are not just text deltas, but also things like this. For example, the first thing that came here was resume conversation token, which probably means, a token that you have to send in a follow-up request. If it has responded back and you respond back with something, most probably in the follow-up request, this token sort of goes to the backend, and then backend sort of checks this token. So it's not like you only can return text deltas over here, you can return whatever you want. Most of the times you'll find most of the messages over here are going to be text deltas. The first text delta is going to be whatever, sure, and then the next text delta is going to be Rust language, so on and so forth. That is how the front end talks to the backend. Why not WebSockets? Because, a lot of answers here, but the simplest answer is there is no need for two-way communication. It's not like the front end needs to keep talking to the backend, it's just that the backend needs to push events. And hence server-side events, which are just built on top of HTTP, are very easy to scale via load balancers, make more sense compared to all the infrastructural complexity that comes via WebSockets. Hence, what we would want is, or not what we would want, most model providers are almost always exposing server-side events. Is this the only way that front ends talk to backends though, or is this the only way that, जो मॉडल्स हैं वो एक्सपोज्ड हैं दुनिया में थ्रू एन HTTP लेयर विद JSON body and the response is coming via event streams. Let me give a hint. Anthropic, Gemini, 𝗟𝗶PH all use this. MCP, something else. gRPC, not exactly gRPC, but gRPC, yes. But a lot of these provide, not any of the conventional providers no, but if you've heard of Devin or Windsurf, if you ever see their harnesses, how Devin talks to its backend, it is actually not through HTTP but through gRPC. The data that is sent is actually binary data or protobufs, if you've heard of it. Why? Because it's generally more optimal. The size of data, if the data is compressed via PBFs or protobufs, is much smaller compared to JSON. JSON is, if this JSON blob is let's say 1 megabyte, if you compress it using protobufs, it'll be down to maybe 1/5 of that. Any big company that you can think of, let's say an Uber, will eventually move from HTTP to gRPC wherever they can. Browsers don't understand gRPC, which is why for use cases where browser has to talk to a server, you can't use gRPC. You can at max use protobufs or binary as the data over here. You will still use HTTP. But if backends are talking to backends, which this case that is true, right? There's a backend that is talking to backend. If there is a terminal agent, is that a front end talking to a backend, or is that a backend talking to a backend? Backend. Even though terminal agent looks like a front end, it is mostly a backend only. It's still a Node.js process, right? It's not running inside the browser. The browser is what doesn't understand gRPC. The terminal Node.js understands gRPC, and hence there is the fancy providers, think of a Devin, will optimize this layer more. And I can show you the code I created for Pi. I created the Devin provider, and the code is much more complicated compared to other providers because Devin uses protobufs compared to the others. All right.
भैया आपने वहाँ पे एक स्क्रीनशॉट दिखाया था, उसमें जो टोकन है वो encrypted है, ऐसे
कहाँ?
आगे
नेटवर्क
रिक्वेस्ट
हाँ नो ये रहा
आगे टोकन encrypted
कहाँ?
थर्ड लाइन हाँ
ये
हाँ तो ये मतलब यूजर ऑथेंटिकेशन टोकन है या रिक्वेस्ट टोकन?
Resume conversation token. It's a JWT.
Okay, it's
just an authentication token. This is not that token. वो नीचे आएगा, देखो ना इवेंट डेल्टा, दिस इज नॉट इवेंट डेल्टा,
जो पेलोड भेज रहे हो encrypt
समझ गया? नहीं नहीं नो, इट्स टेक्स्ट डेटा, थोड़ा मैंने कल देखा था, इफ यू स्क्रॉल डाउन इट्स प्रॉपर टेक्सुअल नॉर्मल डेटा, इट्स नॉट एनक्रिप्टेड.
How LLM detect this should be my last token?
Beautiful. They have another token, the end token. When they are trained on the data जहाँ पे training data can be what is the capital of India, Delhi end token. What is the capital of whatever the US, DC. Thank you. DC end token. So it has been trained over time कि you have to spit out the end token. वो एक और token देता है. We don't see.
ऐसे ही सिखाया गया है.
सिखाया ऐसा है कि when you are done, spit out the end token. The data that it has seen always has an end token at the end. More questions?
GRPC को तो शायद HTTP के ऊपर ही बनता है.
But still faster, right?
वो प्रोटोकॉल के जैसे फास्ट है.
नहीं, yes, I mean that is one reason. The protobuff में
Parsing हट जाती है.
नहीं parsing रहती है. In fact, parsing is more. JSON को parse करना is faster compared to protobufs. Protobufs increase the CPU usage when you're deserializing and serializing data, but they decrease the network usage, as data goes through. The reason they are used is gRPC, it is not for, it is still built on top of HTTP, you are right. But if you ever created a gRPC server, you create a proto file. Have you seen that? Proto file means you define all the types and then you're able to generate clients in TypeScript, Java, whatever. That is one of the reasons that it is used. It is still using HTTP under the hood, so you're not getting any benefits. ऐसा नहीं कि खुद की protocol है. Of course, under the hood it is HTTP.
मेरे मैसेज टाइप बन जाते हैं. मतलब मेरे कोड लिखना आसान है.
Code लिखना आसान है. It auto generates clients for you. You never see the HTTP layer. You only do function calls. Under the hood, sure, there are HTTP calls, but you as a person only have to call certain functions.
Backend communication के लिए बढ़िया है. ये point है.
Backend communication के लिए ही use होता है. You can never use it for front end to backend anyways. Front end doesn't. There are ways to do it, but front end is not able to talk to a gRPC server. It's not able to become a gRPC client unless you write a lot of HTTP logic yourself. More questions? All right. Tokens, नहीं, when our website done. हाँ, तो ये हो गया था ना, cool. Agents, coming to the most important part here. Is this an agent? If I go to Postman, send it a request, get a response? No. It's just an LLM call, right? Is this an agent? Yes and no. ये बड़ा debatable सा है. It's a very thin line. Can be an agent, cannot be an agent, depends on chat UI कितना comprehensive है. If the chat UI is very comprehensive, if it provides you access to a lot of tools, if you can do deep research over here, if you can give it a goal and it can slowly asynchronously figure it out, it can be called an agent. So it's a very thin line between an assistant and an agent. Most chat UIs I'd probably call an assistant only. They don't do very complex things. But वही thin line है क्योंकि if you look at Manus, sorry, not this. If you look at this is also a chat UI. But technically everyone calls this a Manus agent. Manus ने जब एक chat UI निकाला, people said Manus agent आ गया है because it just lets you do slightly more complex things. You can do deep research. You have access to a lot of tools. You can give it a goal, it will figure it out. It may or may not hit outside APIs. Basically, if you enable MCPs over here or tools over here, you can call it an agent. You can call it a tool otherwise. You can call it an assistant otherwise. So very thin line between an assistant and an agent when it comes to a chat UI. Chat UI may can be called an agent, can be called an assistant. This is a very obvious agent. If you've heard of or seen Zapier agents, which basically is you give it a task, whenever I have an email, understand the email and reply back with something and click on create agent, जो भी next step है, it actually spawns an agent for you. It actually starts to listen to incoming messages through Zapier. It does an LLM call to get a response. It then responds back to the user. This technically can be called an agent, which is given a goal and it is able to achieve that goal through a lot of external tools. In this case, the external tools being listening to an email, replying to an email, talking to an LLM, so on and so forth. So agent, clear hai?
If I ask ChatGPT about the recent match, it will browser, right?
Correct.
Can we call agent or agent?
Yes, that's why. If you give it access to tools, depending on the complexity of tools you've given it access to, which in your case you're saying the web search tool, you can call it an agent. It's a very thin line. Mostly yes. If it has access to web search, mostly you can call it an agent because you can ask it to figure out things and it's able to, you've given it a goal which is able to figure out. It still can't listen to your emails and things like these, which is a more comprehensive agent. Sure, very thin line between an assistant and an agent. Any more questions?
Yeah. You send a request to LLM, then it is generating tokens. So it's a server-side event. So let's say I cancel my then how would it know कि the stop होने क्योंकि ये तो single thread है ना वो बस भेज रहा है WebSocket request cancel
There are abort controllers. You can abort requests. You basically, if I go to Postman and if I cancel this request, the backend server that they have, this thing right here, will receive an event. It will get a response or request.onClose. There's a request.onClose callback listener here, which will detect that the client has closed the request for whatever reason, and it can then just tell the LLM to not generate new tokens. Any more questions? All right, ठीक है. These are agents. क्या है यहाँ पे? Isn't this a chat UI? That is why there's a thin line. It can do much more complex tasks. It can book flights for you, which is why it sort of makes sense to call it an agent. But still is ambiguous. Should Manus be called an agent? And if this is an agent, why is ChatGPT UI not an agent and assistant? This 100% is an agent, cursor agent ही इसको बुलाते हैं, and you can ask it to do a bunch of things. It can read your code base, update your code base, so on and so forth. OpenCode, Terminal UIs, Claude Code are all agents. Do they lie in the category? How do they know if they lie in this category? An agent is a software system that can receive a goal, decide on what action to take, use certain tools. The third is the most important part here. Agents are just given access to too many things. In case of terminal agents, they're just given access to your machine. ये मेरा terminal है and do whatever you want. That is like a good sign of this being an agent. The kind of access that it has, the kind of things that it can achieve, the kind of goals that you can provide it with. A chat UI you can't really provide with goals like on my machine change this code base versus in a terminal UI you can do that, which is why a terminal UI is more comfortably an agent compared to a chat UI. Observe the results and take additional actions based on that. ठीक है. I mean, feel free to read this again. It's a very thin line. Someone asks, I don't think anyone would care. I mostly call an assistant agent is fine. Cool. There is this thing called agent loop that we will come back to. What exactly does this mean? How is this implemented? It's the crux of what an agent is. Before that, let's finish everything else. How many of us already know what tools are? I would assume a lot of people. Some. Okay, most people. Cool. Tools or function calls are a way for an LLM to interact with the system outside of its own neural network. A very simple example can be if you ask an LLM to book a flight, or even simpler, if you ask the LLM the current weather in Delhi, it cannot answer that because उसके weights में आज का data नहीं है. It was not trained on today's data. It was trained on data 6 months ago. Hence, it can never answer real-time questions like what is the price of BTC right now, or what is the weather in India right now. Things like these. This is a very simple and important use case, providing LLM access to a bunch of data that is not part of its weights. There is certain data that is already part of the LLM weights. Things like Delhi is in India, it understands. Bangalore is in India, it understands. The current weather in Bangalore, it doesn't know. The current population of India, it doesn't know. It knows what it was 6 months ago. It found that from some internet data, and it's compressed in its weights, but it doesn't know what the current data is. So all the real-time data, it doesn't have access to. My machine, a ChatGPT model doesn't have access to. To allow ChatGPT to edit files in my machine, or to allow ChatGPT or an LLM to search the web, query databases, run code, send emails, read files, call APIs, control software, you can use tool calls. Without tools, an LLM can only generate text based on its training data, which was, let's say, 6 months ago for GPT-5. So whatever has happened in the last 6 months, it does not know. For example, someone asks, what was your thing, search wali? Latest IPL result. The LLM doesn't know that. LLM was trained 6 months ago. It doesn't even know IPL chalu ho gaya. It doesn't even know IPL has started. And hence, the LLM can somehow query the internet, do a Google search, get the response from the Google search, get that response inside its context window, and then respond ki haan, based on the current Google search result, it seems like the winner of IPL is whoever, Kings 11 Punjab. So if I ask ChatGPT or Claude, what is the weather in Delhi? You are not allowed to use any tool. If I specifically say this, it says I can't tell. Based on my general knowledge, Delhi typically experiences falling weather in June. For real-time accurate weather data, you will need to check live weather services. It is saying कि मैं answer नहीं कर सकता. it is actually not able to answer this query if I force it to not use any tools. But if I don't force it to use any tools, it gives me everything. It returns me the current live data. If I ask what is the weather in Delhi, it returns me the weather in Delhi. If I ask a follow-up question, did you use any tools to get this data? It says yes, I used the weather fetch tool. Hence, this tells you the Claude UI has access to a lot of tools. Like he mentioned, Claude and ChatGPT UI have access to the web search tool, which let the Claude LLM do a web search. The full web search happens, the Claude LLM to get back the response from the web search. Same is true for this weather fetch tool call. The LLM can do this tool call to fetch the current weather, get it in its context window, and then respond. Okay, I think the weather in Delhi is XYZ. The interesting part is how LLMs do this. Thoda bahut we understand that if I ask it a question like this, what is the weather in Delhi? It understands it needs to do a tool call. The question is, how does it let the world know कि मुझे tool call करनी है? The LLM, before we go there, I just asked, Claude, what all tools do you have access to? There are like a bunch of tools it returned. Okay, ye tools. In the chat UI interface, you get access to the web search tool, which is what he mentioned, image search, weather, sports data, so on and so forth. The interesting question is, how do LLMs do tool calls? Since they can only generate text. The LLM model, originally the first attention model, GPT 2.5 that came out, text comes in, text comes out. How can an LLM somehow talk to a get weather tool call? What is a tool call? HTTP जैसी लग रही है. The LLM needs to somehow talk to api.weatherservices.com/Delhi, get a response, right? But the LLM, the architecture, this black box over here is never really supposed to do that. It can only take inputs, tokens, output tokens. So if you ask it what is the weather in Delhi, how does it do a tool call?
In prompt we add these tools I have access, you can use. And अगर तुमको कोई सा भी tool call करना है मेरे को बता देना, मैं match कर लूँगा if else, just like that.
Okay.
I'll do a tool call. I'll do a tool call.
That's fine.
Response and then
Okay. हाँ?
ये तुमने पूछा था, ये इसका response.
Oh, one more time.
It gives the JSON format of finding this kind of a tool.
The LLM gives a JSON response of this is what I need. Okay. What were you saying?
We define a set of format for it to respond back. And
Correct.
We pass it and we check it code to
Correct. Perfect. That is perfect. Very concise.
I think initially it was like an emergent behavior, like when they train larger models, they able to do two calls. Then they find a way to like training models, they able to do two calls. Like initially, they didn't know.
Exactly. GPT 2.5 did not know how to do tool calls. This came up as a feature. Okay, we need to allow LLMs to be able to talk to the outside world. So LLMs were literally trained. Okay, if you have been given access to a bunch of tools, you need to spit out text that looks like this. An LLM can only spit out text. It cannot do an HTTP call. It cannot talk to a certain service. So the LLMs were trained in their, GPT-4, GPT-5. Okay, if you've been given access to a bunch of tools and a question, for example, access to the weather tool and the web search tool, and the question is what is the weather in Delhi, you can spit out text in a certain format, letting the other party, whoever talked to you, letting them know कि मुझे ये tool call करनी है, letting them know कि please do this tool call by spitting out text. This party actually does the tool call, which means actually calls the weather API. That is the backend that does it. Appends it to the context, resends the full message history. The full message history मतलब my original message, what is the weather in Delhi? इसका response, please do this tool call. My response, कि the answer to this tool call is 31 degrees Celsius. You resend all of this to the LLM, and then the LLM responds with the final answer. कि okay, based on my current learnings, the weather is 31 degrees Celsius. Execution layer backend है. LLM is only the text spitting out layer. It's just spitting out text in a certain way because it was fine-tuned over time or trained over time. कि अगर आपको टूल कॉल करनी है, if you're supposed to टूल कॉल, spit out text that looks in a certain format.
वो LLM call command भी लिख के backend को भेजता है, backend call command execute करके weather का response LLM को भेज के front end में जाता है.
How does this guy know what is the latest weather API? 6 महीने पहले ट्रेन था. What if there's a new weather API? You should always keep the implementation layer here, right? You hard coded it कि weather API is weatherapi.com. LLM was trained after spending $20 million. weatherapi.com बंद हो गई, तो हालत खराब हो गई ना.
भैया जो पुराने वाले मॉडल्स हैं वो भी तो चल सकते हैं, टूल कोडिंग कर सकते हैं.
बहुत ओरिजिनल मॉडल्स couldn't.
क्योंकि आप सिर्फ आपने टूल्स दे रखे हैं कि भाई ये वाला टूल रन कर दियो जब ये वाला रिस्पॉन्स आए, तो अगर उसमें उसने भेजा कि रन वेदर, तो आपने चेक कर लिया कि
Correct. 100%.
आपने मैच कराया फंक्शन से.
You're saying before tool calls were a thing, I could always mention in the system prompt, right? कि if you want XYZ tool, then return this one. You can do that. But their SDKs are, the back. If this does tell you कि tool call करना है, this tells you, the original client, कि ये tool call करना है in a specific format. In that case, you're just building that whole layer yourself. आप खुद से बना रहे हो, totally possible. Also, it's been trained over time डंडा मार के weights के through के you have to return this, but it probably return that better compared to आपने system prompt में डाल दिया and hoping कि शायद आ जाए.
मतलब ये ठीक है, ऐसे ही होता है. फंक्शन की गोली होता है कि बोला कि आपको वेदर
आप फॉर्मेट कर रहे हो ना कि इट जस्ट रिटर्न्स योर फॉर्मेट के वेदर कॉल ब्रैकेट ओपन आर्ग्यूमेंट वन ब्रैकेट क्लोज होता वैसा सही है. यू कैन टोटली जस्ट सिस्टम प्रॉम्प्ट में डाल सकते हो, बट आई वुड फील मोर कॉन्फिडेंट इन अ मॉडल दैट हैज बीन ओवर टाइम ट्रेन्ड टू स्पिट आउट टेक्स्ट इन अ स्पेसिफिक फॉर्मेट.
इनिशियली जब ChatGPT आया था तो उसमें डिस्क्रिप्शन रहता था कि 2020 तक डेटा अपडेटेड है.
Correct.
उसके आगे का उसके पास नहीं, तो ये टूल कॉल पहले नहीं हुआ उसके पास वेब सर्च का.
बट फिर भी आप प्रॉम्प्ट में डाल सकते हैं ना.
नहीं, टूल कॉल्स आर ऑलवेज पार्ट ऑफ द प्रॉम्प्ट. इनपुट में ही आप बताते हो this guy will tell this guy and this guy will tell this guy कि you have access to tool 1, tool 2, tool 3, tool 4, tool 5. It is not trained on a generic weather tool. It just knows if I have been given 5 tools and I feel like one of them is relevant, I have to spit out text in a specific format. It is not like यहाँ पे hard code हो रखे हैं tools आपको access देना ही पड़ेगा.
तो हम डायरेक्टली उसको ये भी नहीं बोल सकते कि दिस इज द API टू कॉल करके डेटा लेंगे.
There is no HTTP client here. The transformer architecture, the algorithm, the final, what is this thing over here? There are 2 files. There is a Python or a C file. There is a weights file. Weights file is very big. 8 billion parameter है, तो it's let's say 30 GB. That 30 GB is loaded in memory by the C process, by the Python process. Input जो आ रहा है, it one by one generates token. That's all it does. It doesn't have the concept of an HTTP client that can hit a server or anything like that. This guy doesn't understand other protocols. Just understands one protocol. Attention. It can only take certain inputs, spit out outputs. Can you change this? Can you make this a little more hybrid? Maybe there is an architecture where the LLM can directly talk to things. अभी के लिए LLM can only generate text, so this is a very weird way around it कि इससे text ही ऐसा generate करा लो. Make it generate text that looks like a function call, and then do the actual function call at your backend or wherever. In this case, OpenCode.
LLM ने बैकएंड को बोला कि ये वाला टूल करना है.
Correct.
फिर डेटा गया, फिर उसने बोला अब ये वाला टूल चाहिए.
Correct.
तो ये पता कैसे चलेगा कि ये अब एंड करना है, फिर रिजल्ट भी चाहिए?
कैसे पता चलेगा? तुम बताओ.
कुछ मतलब जो LLM ने रिस्पांस भेजा उसमें कोई फ्लैग वगैरह?
Very close.
रिस्पांस में टूल नहीं आया.
एंड तो होगा तो क्या
रिस्पांस में कोई टूल नहीं आया, खत्म. As long as it asks you for tools, you execute, you resend. Send you tools, execute, you resend. At some point, it will not send you any tools.
अगर बैकएंड कोई टूल एक्सेस नहीं कर पाया या फिर कॉल नहीं कर पाया,
वो बैकएंड की गलती है. बैकएंड ने भेजा क्यों वो टूल यहाँ पे? The backend is what sends in the system prompt कि I have access to these tools. मुझे इनमें से आउटपुट कर देना. बैकएंड ने भेजा है कि उस पर नहीं है तो. Any more? Okay, right. This example is OpenCode hitting ChatGPT backend hitting LLMs. General, let's say OpenCode नहीं है. There is a normal Node.js backend that I have that is talking to an LLM. हाँ. If the backend hits the weather API.
और हमें पता चल रहा है कि rate weather is this. So फिर उसमें LLM का रोल प्ले कर रहा है आंसर को रेट करने में.
LLM just एक
मतलब अगर एक वेबसाइट का डेटा चाहिए.
Correct.
उसको बोलेंगे कि इस वेबसाइट के डेटा रेट करो.
Correct.
और ये हमें डेटा चाहिए. तो हमें वो डायरेक्टली वो डेटा पैकिंग से मिल सकता है. What is the role of LLM?
Beautiful question. NLP, natural language processing. You can, person ने पूछा what is the weather? It reads the LLM. Person asked, let's say this is the client, asked what is the weather. Backend talk to LLM. LLM said I need to do a tool call. You are saying कि if the tool call is happening here, might as well return the response from here. यही कह रहे हो. The thing is, the user might have asked, what is the weather in LLM? Return to me in the voice of Katy Perry. So when the weather comes back, if you return it 21 degrees Celsius, he'll be like, this doesn't sound like Katy Perry. You get 21 degrees Celsius, you tell it back, okay, I asked you to respond in Katy Perry's voice and ask you the weather. You asked me to do a tool call. Here is the result of the tool call. I send it 4 things. Then it returns in Katy Perry's voice, okay, the weather today in Delhi is 21 degrees Celsius, ooh la la, or something like that, you know. What? Merge करता है. And then just gives you the best answer it can. That answer could also be 21 degrees Celsius, जो हम यहीं से लौटा सकते थे. But it'll be something like, you know, the weather in Delhi today is sunny, 21 degrees Celsius, something like that.
हमारे बैकएंड पे 20 टूल्स हैं, तो मैं सारे के सारे टूल का इंफॉर्मेशन भेजूंगा LLM को या फिर सिर्फ 5 जो नीडेड है फॉर दिस.
Our backend has 20 tools. You said, should I send 20 tools here or only the 5 tools I need? How do you know what are the 5 tools you need? So you first talk to the LLM and say, can you tell me what all tools you need? LLM says, I think I need these tools. Then you do another call and tell it, these are the tool calls. That is correct. That is exactly what happens in Claude. Claude has the Claude UI when you go to. It has access to 100 different skills, right? It has polymarket skill also, it has 𝗟𝗶ः skill also. If it starts, sorry, tools, my bad, not skill, tools. Now, if you ask it something and it appends all the tools in the system prompt, the context window becomes very big. You give it a lot of tools it doesn't need access to. So what Claude does it, and you know, there's a Manus guys have a YouTube video about this, and Manus also does this, is, I mean, they do something very complicated, but if you simplify it, they don't give the LLM any tools. They just tell the LLM that all my tools exist in this folder, in some sandbox. Yeah, you know, they basically tell the LLM, if you ever need access to tools, मुझे बता देना. I will let you know what all tools I have. So in the first prompt, it doesn't give all the tools. It only gives, you know, let's say 5 tools, the important ones. A web search tool is very important. You know, get weather is not important. Not everyone is going to ask weather information. So there is no point of sending the weather tool along with it. Web search, super common. But the LLM, you tell the LLM the system prompt, if you ever need access to tools, मेरे पास हैं, मुझसे पूछ लेना. So the LLM asks from time to time, do you have access to XYZ tool? This guy checks in this folder, or you know, the LLM does an ls in a folder. कि इस folder में कौन से tools present हैं. You respond back with the ls of, you know, all the folders or the files that you have. Then it checks कि अच्छा इसमें get weather tool का मुझे context दो. You return it the get weather tool का context, and then it does the get weather tool call.
But अगर LLM ने कुछ ऐसा tool मांग लिया which is actually not needed, how will we verify?
We can't verify. You trust the LLM. ये बहुत smart है भाई वो. It will not ask.
एक verification layer तो होती है कि
The verification layer, if at all, is there needs to be another LLM or an SLM, right? If it tells you, give me web search tool, but you want to verify is web search tool really needed or not, you will need another LLM to check, okay, for this prompt, does a web search tool make sense or not, right? But generally, you trust the intelligence of these guys now. Okay, you know, they will not ask you something that they don't need.
Like we can give the respond to the LLM, like name of the tools I have. Ask me like how to use it and how to.
You can do that also, but the names are also too many, right? There are infinite tools that you can create. 𝗟𝗶ः, Robinhood, Polymarket are just trading के 4 tools मैंने बताए. There are hundreds of tools that Claude has written. Even giving the names is too much. So let it ask. Skills are different. Skills are never meant to be executed. It is just that the backend tells the LLM that I have again access to a lot of skills. If you need any skills, let me know. So this guy can ask, do you have any DevOps skill? And then it's just a very big file that it can respond with. Yes, this is a DevOps skill. You don't know all of this intelligence. Let me tell you. ये extra चीजें मेरे को पता है. And then it just continues with it. There is no execution that happens on the backend in case of a skill. But yes, there is a file that it can ask for. You return it. It has a lot of. Sorry. Yes and no. If
additional system prompt for the task.
Yes, system prompt में extra चीजें डाल देते हैं कि you know कि for this task these are the things. For example, one of the more nice skill that I have is a skill. What is a skill? It's just a text file, MD file. The one that I have is how I deploy my websites on my infrastructure. I have a Kubernetes cluster where I deploy things. Deploying a website is deploy a database, deploy a backend, deploy a front end, add a load balancer, create an entry in godaddy.com for API.100xdev.com and website.100xdev.com. All of these have been written in a very nice file. Whenever I YouTube maybe when I'm going live or otherwise create a website, all I do is give that access to that skill to Claude Code, and then it's able to deploy everywhere.
Better context for particular task.
Yes, and a lot of times internal context है. वो it's so good at DevOps कि तुम DevOps में उसको क्या ही सिखाओगे और. But it doesn't know my infrastructure. कि Harkirat has a very specific information about me, about the company is what you skills have.
जैसे आपने पहले बोला कि LLM सिर्फ टेक्स्ट जनरेट कर सकता है and बैकएंड से रिक्वेस्ट आएगी. अब जैसे एग्जांपल था कि गेट मी द वैपर ऑफ द न्यू दिल्ली केटी पेरी वो जो LLM का जैसे एक पाइथन फाइल और एक वेटेज फाइल उसके अंदर ही जो TTS वाली आर्किटेक्चर लगा होगा या फिर उसका एक अलग मॉडल होगा.
Oh, when I said voice, I mean like her, like say ulala, not like कि उसकी आवाज में आवाज नहीं.
जैसे अब टेक्स्ट जनरेट कर रहा है.
Right.
अब जो मल्टी मॉडल्स यूज हो रहे हैं.
Okay.
उनका आर्किटेक्चर कैसे?
You are saying how voice agents are different, right? You're not asking, now you're changing the model to not be a text to text or image text to text model. You are saying what if it is a text to voice model, Harkirat? What happens there? यही कह रहे हो?
कोलैबोरेटिव कैसे मतलब अब या तो वो टेक्सचर कर सकता है जनरेट या फिर वॉइस कर सकता है.
दोनों कर सकते हैं.
मल्टी मॉडल्स कैसे काम करते हैं?
दोनों कर सकते हैं. There are a few architectures to do voice specifically. What you're asking is how voice model works. So when you were at Roomrik, right? वहाँ गए थे ना तुम? तो they are one of the voice AI companies, and they do voice AI a certain way. Smallest AI is another one. वो एक और Indian founder है दिल्ली का, नाम भूल गया. Whisperflow, हाँ? Sarvam? हाँ, I'm sure they also do some level of voice. Sure. OpenAI has OpenAI real time. 11 Labs का आपने नाम सुना होगा. DeepGram है. There are many companies in the voice AI niche.
वो एक स्पेसिफिक उसका तो सिर्फ वॉइस मॉडल ही है.
Depend. वही सबका अलग अलग है. जैसे Roomrik specifically does not have a voice model. They have a speech to text model. That basically means if I ask it, "Hi Roomrik, what are you doing?" It first converts my speech to text. They pass it to some intelligence layer. They talk. That text goes to an LLM or an SLM. You need it to be really fast. So small language model. It responds back with some text, and then they have a text to speech model. So they have created this architecture where the intelligence is broken into three parts. There is one speech to text layer. There are three different models. There is not one LLM, but there is one SLM, one speech to text model, one text to speech model. The text to speech model was trained on a lot of text data and a lot of voice output. The speech to text model was trained on a lot of speech data and text output. The LLM was trained on a lot of text data and a lot of text output data. So they have a 3-layered speech to text, intelligence, text to speech model. That is one way to do it. The other way to do it is what OpenAI real-time does, which is the model itself is trained on voice, image, text input and voice, text output. The training layer itself was done on 3 different modalities of input, 2 different modalities of output. Which one is better? Second one, of course. Why?
Because वो उसमें काफी ज़्यादा में SLM वगैरह.
It's faster for sure. The first architecture cannot compete with the second architecture. That's one. 2, you get a lot of coherence information when you get access to the raw voice data at the intelligence layer. पीछे कोई खांस रहा है तो it can predict कि you're in a hospital. Weird example. Versus if you use the first approach, that all of that information is lost if you just convert the speech to text. No one knows पीछे कोई खांस रहा था, पीछे announcement हो रही थी, right? So a lot of surrounding information gets lost if you use the first approach. In the second approach, all of that information is there. So that is why the second model is better, but the second model is also more expensive. Running speech to text and text to speech and SLM is very simple. You can run it on this Mac, you can run it on your Mac. You can very easy to build systems like these because very small speech to text, text to speech and language models are available, जो Mac में भी चल जाते हैं. Second one is very tough, very hard. We can't do it on our Mac.
Text भी generate कर सकते हैं, voice भी and image generation भी.
I don't know if they do image. But they can take images, text and voice as input. Specifically, I'm talking about OpenAI real time, and it can spit out text and voice.
या जैसे कि हम कोई भी क्वेरी देते हैं, जैसे कि एग्जांपल देता हूँ, गिव मी AI नेटिव इंजीनियर रोल्स राइट नाउ, तो वो
जब टूल कॉल करता है ना तो एक साथ वो 10 टूल कॉल करता है बट वो क्वेरी एनहांस हो जाती है जब वो क्वेरी डाल रहा होता है वो टूल कॉल में तो वो कैसे होता है और जब वो 10 टूल कॉल कर चुका होता है वो बाद में भी 10 और करता है फिर पास करता है वो लिमिट कौन सेट करता है यानी वो लोग ही सेट करते हैं या हमें यानी कोई ऑप्शन हमारे पास भी
गुड क्वेश्चन फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन क्या था मुझे समझ नहीं आया कि वो
लेट्स से मैंने क्वेरी डाली गिव मी द
बेस्ट रोल्स इन एआई एंड यू सेड 5
हाँ अब वो क्वेरी जब टूल में जाती है ना तो वो ऑलरेडी एनहांस हो चुकी होती है कि वो ऐसे भी कर देता है कि वाई कॉम्बिनेटर्स भी लगा देता है वेल फाउंड भी लगा देता है वो हमें नहीं लगाना पड़ता
okay got it makes sense you ask the LLM you ask the LLM कि give me the best job roles and you automatically see कि the first search was done for news.ycombinator.com/jobs second one was done for wellfound.com/jobs ऐसा नहीं था कि first there was a Google search tool call for this that means I would assume all those 5 links are hard coded in the LLM itself. The LLM understands and remembers those 5 links कि हाँ jobs तो यही मिलती हैं. news.yc.com/jobs is a very common job board. wellfound.com is common job board. So the LLM I would assume is responding. I could be wrong. मतलब it's क्या? Let's say that's not there. That could be there, but let's say वो आप नए आए हो ChatGPT UI में, you're fresh in the ChatGPT UI, you ask this question and you immediately let's just do that ना मतलब if I go to let's say Claude
links तो बदलते रहते हैं
वही exactly so it's a very scary thing for an LLM to return a link because you don't know if that link is valid or not so I'm also curious I would assume it always does a Google search first
so if it does provide the link where job is available you can direct that link
I get it अच्छा वो तो है that is pretty simple right the LLM asked to do a web search jobs AI 2025 you did a web search got 5 links 5 links का सारा context you extracted you gave it to the LLM finally summarized कि I found 5 links इन 5 में ये है आप इस पर क्लिक कर लो इस पर क्लिक कर लो तो there is a Google search tool that is used
bias है y combinator के पहले लिखा
I don't know I would assume it never returns links let's do it get me latest AI job openings I would assume it first does a web search and then वो 5 links को extract करता है I don't think the LLM ever returns a link. It can return things like, Y Combinator or something. Internet, yeah. It can return terms like Y Combinator. Okay, you search for Y Combinator jobs 2025, well-found jobs 2025. ये सब return कर सकता है. It will probably never return a link. I could be wrong. Let's see. It probably won't. Well, that just seems dangerous. I think labs are smart enough to know that. इंटरनेट बंद हो गया शायद क्लाउड ही डाउन है सही में नहीं मैं तो इंटरनेट ही बंद हो गया चल गया Okay, let's do it on ChatGPT. Doing it on ChatGPT. Give me. In this case, it did go through 3 links. वो दिखा नहीं रहा है वो बस links दे रहा है एंड में मुझे sources. I would assume it first does a web search, gets these links, and then on top of these links builds the context.
So like Kimi भी ऐसे ही करता है कि वो सीधा उस वेबसाइट पे ले जाता है करियर पेज पे सीधा.
हाँ. Correct, but it probably does a web search first. The LLM tells to do a web search, AI jobs in 2025. It does a web search, gets 10 links. उन 10 links का context को थोड़ा scrapes, gives it to the LLM, then the LLM responds back. वो 10 links LLM को नहीं पता है. These are all 2027 links, 2026 links, latest links. LLM doesn't hard code these links. LLM at max asks the backend to do a web search. You do the web search. I mean, if we send this, if we give LLM access to a web search tool, and ask it this prompt, 99% the LLM is going to respond back with web search tool run karo with AI jobs 25 latest remote jobs, something like that.
वो SEO का ही लग रहा है क्योंकि अभी मैंने प्लॉट किया तो उसने बस कीवर्ड बताया AI फुल स्टैक इंजीनियर जॉब्स, फिर उसमें रैंडम लिंक्स ओपन किए शिकागो और ऐसे INSF ऐसे.
What you're saying is web search कर रहा है, right?
वेब सर्च कर रहा है, अलग-अलग कीवर्ड चेंज करके उसने 3-4 करी वेब सर्च.
Long story short, it doesn't hard code the links. It will at max ask your backend to do a web search on a term like what is the latest job AI 2025, and then the links that it gets, it builds on top of that.
और वो लिमिट क्या होती है यार, यानी उन लोगों ने सेट करके रखी है?
That's whatever our backend, the web search tool exists in our backend. That is whatever we have set in our backend, right? 10 हो गई, 5 हो गई, whatever it is. Okay, the slightly nuanced statement. My model simply learns if I feel like system prompt and one of these tools is relevant for me right now, I have to spit that tool out in a specific format.
So different labs must have implemented different formats.
100%.
So how does the OpenCode, अलग-अलग models?
That question is coming. That is the last slide of today. But yes, that is a very good question. Okay, every LLM will have different outputs for what comes when a tool call happens. I mean, simple answer is, of course, you don't see that weird format in your finally OpenCode, right? The weird thing that it returns you gets digested into a simple JSON object. That JSON object comes over here. Okay, for this is a tool call ID, this is the function, these are the arguments. And then you respond back. But again, यहाँ से यहाँ की schema is also very different for everyone. Anthropic has a certain way to return messages, tool call messages. Google has different, OpenAI has different, so on and so forth. And hence, the API providers have very different schemas which make a product like this very complex when you're supporting multiple providers. Claude Code doesn't support multiple providers. This is not a challenge for them. They only support Anthropic. But OpenCode supports everything, which is why one very big part of Pi and OpenCode is going to be somehow digesting their APIs into one. कैसे होता है वो we'll not see, but I'll show you the file by the end why there is one very complex, point in Pi. And the thing that I wrote, I mentioned I have Devin key subscription, nothing else. Pi doesn't work with Devin, so I wrote the provider for Pi, which was very complex because it's not even, this request is not even an HTTP request, it's a gRPC request, which is why the provider is very different. So their provider schemas are very different for everyone. Sometimes they're not even HTTP. If they are HTTP, it's not necessary that the format you're getting back is the same, so you have to sort of stitch it all together.
Labs must have not disclosed the format, so do they experiment and find out?
Yes and no. Everyone has their own formats. They do not disclose their own formats. You can of course see them by the end, जब वो train हो गया. But I don't think there's a standard yet. Okay, everyone should train it this way.
Yeah. जैसे in normal web search, we do searching and then based on कि आपने अपनी website की indexing वगैरह कैसे करी है, can these OpenAI and all these LLMs sort of make money through the people कि after जो company है उसका हम पहले ऊपर दिखाएंगे?
They can.
Optimize.
I don't think anyone does that yet. OpenAI does something. I don't think it's this. There are other companies that do LLM SEO now. That is a very big niche. OpenAI doesn't do it. There are a lot of companies that say, okay, we will bring you up in LLM SEO. Okay, LLMs will, if you ask LLM what is the best cloud provider, it spits out Google Cloud. So you can do a lot of hacks outside the LLM to make sure the LLMs understand you, which is usually Reddit पे बहुत ज़्यादा अच्छी चीज़ें डालो because they're trained on Reddit data. So if you write a lot of good posts about Google Cloud on Reddit, most probably in the next release of a model, every model will say Google Cloud is really good. So there's a lot of LLM SEO companies. OpenAI said they're doing advertisements. I don't think they've done it yet. So if they do it, it will not be at the search tool level. It will just be top right पे. If you ask it, how to make muscles, you'll see a gym advertisement at the top right. That's it.
ये चैट में आना चालू हो गया है। मैंने देखा था कि चैट में वो बता रहा है कि सप्लीमेंट्स ये है, फिर बोलता है कि एक अभी emerging player है, ये भी सप्लीमेंट आप ट्राई कर सकते हो। ऐसे बोल के खत्म कर दिया।
But did it right? It's promoted. Ad है ये. If it didn't write, then it's probably not an ad. They have to disclose if it is an ad. Yeah.
सारे रिस्पॉन्स सेम दे देते हैं। कोई तो चैट जीपीटी है, एक क्वेश्चन आप करोगे तो उस पे गलत आंसर दे रहा है, बट क्लॉड लेट से उसका पैटर्न मॉडल है, तो एक आंसर के बाद रुक जाता है कि अगर रॉन्ग आंसर है उसको पता है तो इट डजंट गिव अ रॉन्ग आंसर. बट जीपीटी के जो प्री पेड वो बिना पेड वाले मॉडल्स हैं, दे जस्ट प्रोड्यूस टेक्स्ट में तो सही है ऐसा क्या है. Hallucination को कैसे करेक्ट करता है?
They just train bigger, better models. If you play with a free, they just train bigger, better models. If the ChatGPT free model that you are using is very small, is not trained on enough data, does not use enough compute, तो बहुत छोटा सा मॉडल चल रहा है. Of course, it can answer wrong things. If you tell it also कि आप गलत बोल रहे हो, it might still say नहीं I am right. Compared to Claude का जो free model है वो थोड़ा बड़ा होगा. How do they deal with it? They just make bigger models which they just hope are not going to hallucinate or not going to give you the wrong answer. If you're ever getting a bad answer from an LLM, it just means the LLM is not trained well, right? And they have better models, they just don't want to expose it for the free APIs. You don't seem convinced. समझ आ गया?
Context window भी तो होता है. Context window का शेप भी तो hallucinate करना स्टार्ट करता है.
हाँ, but that is another.
In the training data we can have, like if you do not know the answer, like you can still know. If you do not know the answer of the question.
You can add that to a system prompt. I would assume everyone adds that. If it's still hallucinating, then the model is just not trained well. उसको नहीं समझ आ रहा है कि वो गलत बोल रहा है. It is telling you wrong things.
We can add it to train data also, no?
You don't add that to training data. That is more of an instruction it has to follow. It is trained on a lot of data which it just assumes is the truth. You can't tell it कि ये truth है, ये truth है, ये truth है. भाई truth ही respond करियो. The algorithm is supposed to respond with truth. It is never supposed to respond with anything bad.
Bigger, better model, bigger data is not the way I think मुझे लग रहा है कि it's a way to curb hallucination. क्योंकि bigger data में jumping तो रहेगा ही.
नहीं, bigger models का मतलब ये नहीं होता. When I say bigger models, I mean everyone is training on the same data. मान लो there is a small model which has less parameters, big model that has a lot of parameters. Both of them are trained on the same data. The small model will be able to remember lesser things, right? If there is a 1 GB model file and there is a 20 GB model file, all of the internet data is compressed in 20 GBs here and 1 GB here. Of course, the 1 GB will not remember everything. The 20 GB will remember much more. So if you talk to the 1 GB model, it might tell you bad things. क्यों भूल चुका है? Even though it was trained on all the data, it can't remember all of that data in such a small brain. Versus if there's a 20 GB model, उसने वो सारा data 10 जगह अलग-अलग store कर रखा है. It was able to retain more of that data, more of that input. And hence, if you ask both of them questions, of course the bigger model will respond better, right?
Well, let's say हम Claude by Opus 4.5 use कर रहे हैं और GPT का equivalent जो कि अगर number of parameters के हिसाब से देखा जाए 70 billion, 2 billion, 100 billion almost same है. Still we can see कि एक ज़्यादा बेहतर respond कर रहा है.
बिल्कुल.
तो फिर वो जो आप कह रहे हो.
बहुत फर्क है ना उसमें. There are a lot of then means उनकी training is better. If let's say ChatGPT and OpenAI and Anthropic have the same model sizes, सब कुछ same है. Yet they perform differently on Sui bench, right? Everything is same. Perfect. तब भी benchmarks में ऐसा तो कभी नहीं होगा ना कि both of them are performing same. If you open Sui bench like we did, two similar models, same weight models, will not necessarily land at the same वो right. They are optimizing for that. वो training के दौरान बहुत चीज़ें ऐसी कर रहे हैं कि हम इस benchmark में ऊपर आ जाए. You have a benchmark in mind कि hallucinate बहुत करता है. Similarly, there are 100 different benchmarks. They are all optimizing to grow on that benchmark. But it's not necessary. If there are two 20 GB files, they're not the same. Claude might have more data. They might be paying Scale AI more, Mercor more. They might have nice RHFL teams, RLHF teams जो बाद में उसको post training में better कर रही हैं. GPT might not have that. It's not necessary if two models are the same size, they'll be trained similarly. I can train a model of that size today. मैं अपनी मशीन में zeros weight से initialize करके एक weight इधर कर दूंगा. मैं कह दूंगा मेरे पास भी 20 GB model है. But my 20 GB model isn't that good, right? Because I did not spend enough time, energy, money in training that model. I did not have the best data. I did not do a lot of human feedback after that to make it better. That is right. It's not necessary two models have the same size, they will perform equally. And benchmarks are the simplest example of this. XAI का मॉडल आया वो सबसे 30% better perform कर रहा है. Size तो same ही है. It's still the same size, but it's able to perform better because it's trained better.
Like मैं कुछ सर्च कर रहा हूँ वेब में, मतलब मॉडल से मैंने कुछ पूछा, उसके लिए मॉडल ने वेब सर्च करा. एंड मैंने नोटिस करा है कि वेब में जो डेटा अवेलेबल है वो आउटपुट देता है, बट जो सोर्स मतलब ग्राउंड रियलिटी है वो LLM चेक नहीं करता, मतलब वो सोर्स चेक करता है. तो सपोज स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम टुडे अगर मैं फॉल्स डेटा 100 ऑफ वेबसाइट में डालते जा रहा हूँ तो कुछ टाइम बाद क्या वो रियलिटी बन जाएगा? और लाइक इज देयर एनी आर्किटेक्चर व्हिच प्रिवेंट दिस फॉल्सी अटेम्प्ट?
There is no way to pretend this, right? If you are actually able to everywhere on all news articles print that Modi is the president of the US. And everyone's Google searching and saying, अरे मोदी ही है. That is our source of truth, right? हम जहाँ सर्च कर रहे हैं हमें मोदी दिख रहा है, तो मॉडल को भी लगेगा मोदी ही है यूएस का प्रेसिडेंट, जबकि ही इज नॉट. If you can do that good SEO, you can actually change the truth, you will change it everywhere. That's what news outlets do, right?
कोई years तक करता क्या
नहीं कर पाएगा. How will you do it? You're competing with hundreds of people who are saying मोदी तो इंडिया का है, and you know you are saying नहीं यूएस का है.
मतलब खुद का प्रमोशन के लिए.
That's what SEO is, right? That कहीं ना कहीं you put yourself up the SEO. हमारा SEO बहुत बुरा है. Reddit पे हम पे गाली पड़ती है बहुत ज़्यादा. तो एडवांस हाई टेक स्कूल they feel like बहुत गंदा है. But I don't think हम गंदे हैं, ठीक है ना? तो वही है. Internet you can sway in any direction based on whoever controls media, whoever controls SEO is a new person that comes is going to Google what is high tech school review. So if they see the Reddit post, of course they will feel it is bad. It may or may not be bad. But if that's the first thing that pops up, then that is what they see. That is what the perception is. That is what an LLM sees. If you ask an LLM, same thing होती है. वो कहता है YouTube अच्छा है, course थोड़ा बुरा है, school बहुत महंगा है. Because that's what it sees. That's what it's seen on Reddit over time.
Yeah. Basically, like I'm working with Codex right now, and मैं वहाँ पे एक बड़े कोड बेस पे काम कर रहा हूँ. तो वहाँ पे मैं prompt देता हूँ कि I wanted to refactor this code base. तो वो क्या करता है कि sometimes ऐसे ही कि वो multiple parallel agents create करता है. तो like एक एजेंट वर्क करता है एक स्पेसिफिक पार्ट में. तो हाउ डू गेट मतलब वो कैसे उनको पता चलता है कि लाइक इस वाले पार्ट को अपने को टच नहीं करना है, इस वाले पार्ट को मतलब डिवाइड कैसे करता है इसमें?
सिस्टम प्रॉम्प्ट. देयर इज यू आस्क इट टू डू समथिंग, वो 3 डिफरेंट एजेंट्स चालू कर देता है. इट टेल्स द फर्स्ट वन यू आर अ हेल्पफुल रीडिंग एजेंट, योर जॉब इज टू रीड द कोड बेस एंड समराइज फॉर मी. इट टेल्स द सेकंड वन यू आर अ PR डिस्क्रिप्शन वेरीफायर, आई एम गिविंग यू अ PR डिस्क्रिप्शन इशू. मैंने मान लो the task that you're asking to do is a GitHub issue. You just give it a GitHub issue number. So it can spawn a sub agent whose job is, given this GitHub issue, return me all the text.
But still like multiple क्योंकि 3 से 4 एजेंट्स हैं.
Okay.
तो वो conflict तो कर सकते हैं.
What do you mean they can conflict?
Like वो एक एजेंट लेट्स से कि कोई फाइल है utils करके. तो उसमें एक एजेंट पहले से ऑलरेडी काम कर रहा है.
Oh, there are a lot of answers here. Generally, when you have a single Codex session and you ask you start 3 agents, only one of them is the right agent. Generally वो end में ही आता है. If you look at Claude Code का architecture, it does let's say 2 agents initially, one to read the file, one to read a lot of files, summarize the code base, second one to figure out what files to read, and then when all of this is done, it starts to write. अगर आपने Claude Code अभी खोला है,
like वो research का part handle करते हैं separately and एक edit.
Sort of, you can think of that. If you want 2 different agents to write together, it becomes problematic. इसका solution क्या होता है पता है आपको? If I open Codex in 2 tabs and अलग-अलग tabs में I ask it to update, conflicts नहीं आते क्यों?
हाँ, पता नहीं.
हाँ? Shared memory अगर है तो conflicts आने चाहिए ना. Both of them start both of them if they start to write on the same file, conflicts आ जाएंगे ना. तो how do
context sharing होता होगा उनके बीच में?
नहीं होता. There is a way to do it, but नहीं. By default, 2 session tabs don't talk to each other.
GitHub कुछ फीचर्स यूज करते हैं, अलग-अलग ब्रांचेस बना देते हैं.
Work trees बनाते हैं. They make different work trees which are very close to branches, and they avoid conflicts that way. Cool. Any more questions? Pause. एक बार खत्म कर लें. So last question फिर. More or less, LangChain and LangGraph इतनी जल्दी it changes so quickly, like they keep changing architecture left, right, and center. It just makes sense to own it. It's not even that difficult to write, is what people have realized. Hence, the full orchestration layer everyone is owning right now. Cool. We will proceed. Okay.
जैसे हम कहते हैं कि LLM हमारी बातों से सीखता है, क्या वो सच में सीखता है?
When you talk to it in a conversation, it doesn't learn. There is no training that is happening at that time, but they get a lot of data. Not even from conversations, they actually get a lot of data through code.
मतलब वो स्टोर करके रखता है कि बाद में ट्रेन करूँगा तब काम.
Correct. That's what Cursor does. Cursor has a lot of data now of a lot of code bases because everyone uses it. When you accept their terms, you accept कि ये code base सब तुम्हारा. तो they have all of that data, and then hence they're able to train much better models.
But I think he's talking about ChatGPT memory, जो like learned way में एक memory file.
I know. Okay. Even if
हमारी बातों से सीख रहा है.
Even if it does, that is my memory. The LLM doesn't need to know Harkirat likes chocolate, right? मतलब उससे क्या ही सीखेगा वो?
तो फिर मैं multi-memory system.
Cool. All right. There are 2 ways to do streamings from LLMs. One is a stream response, one is a one-shot response. Rarely will you see a one-shot response. Almost always in most UIs, most agents, you will see data backend से stream हो रहा है. So if I ask it something like this, what is the weather in Delhi? It gets an event stream यहाँ बन जाती है. And then this is the full prompt that reaches the LLM. The LLM realizes कि oh, can you see now the system prompt? There is a tool section over here. This is just my schema. Gemini might have different schema. Anthropic might have different schema. I'm assuming that, Anthropic ka schema looks like this, or ChatGPT ka schema looks like this. Okay, whatever tools you have, you add them to the system prompt. In my case, I'm giving it access to only one tool right now. Okay, there is a get weather tool function that you can call, and this is the parameters that it expects. City, which is a string. It understands that these are the tools I can call. It understands the user is asking what is the weather in Delhi. It responds back with something like this. It doesn't return you any text yet. It might return you some text pehle. Hi there, welcome. Let me see what the weather is in Delhi. And then it will return you a tool call and it will stop. It will stop generating more text. It asks you one or sometimes 5 different tool calls. If I ask it, what is the weather in Delhi and in Bombay, so it will return me 2 different tool calls and then it will stop generating more text. ये दोनों tool call मेरे backend में आ जाएंगी. I will execute, the backend will, now when I say backend here, I mean the ChatGPT backend. This is the API backend unka. So this is api.chatgpt.com. My OpenCode, let's say for some reason in OpenCode I asked what is the weather in Delhi, for some weird reason. I would ask in a chat UI, इसमें तो मैं coding task कराऊंगा, but if I did, it will reach the ChatGPT backend, it will reach the LLM will respond back with tools. The tool calls are in this weird textual format, but they can always be converted to JSON by the backend. Backend converts it into JSON, returns it to me. Now it is my job. This is where things get slightly tricky, nothing too tricky. This is my first request. Axios.post/conversation prompt, what is the weather in Delhi? This is the first request that I sent. I get a response. If response.toolcall and response.toolcall.name is get weather. I'll have a bunch of these if else statements. Then I get the weather, api.getweather.com/city. And then I send a new message to the LLM with the original message, the response that the LLM gave me, which was a tool call, and my response to the tool call. When it gave me a tool call, it gave me a tool call ID with it. Does the LLM generate the tool call ID or does the backend do it? Backend. LLM कोई random ID नहीं generate करेगा. LLM will simply tell you this is what I want to be done. You will on the backend append a random ID to it. Return it to the front end. You get it over here, you do the actual tool call, you send another message to the backend, to the LLM with the original question, the first answer from the LLM and then the follow-up answer. This is the original call that I made and this is the follow-up call that I had to make because there is one tool call that the LLM asked me to do. ये सबको समझ आ रहा है? Tools are run from the server machine that initiates the original LLM call. ये भी सबको समझ आ रहा है? This is sometimes a little confusing. Tools are run from the server/machine that initiates the original LLM call, which in this case would be my OpenCode, which is running inside my Mac. Initiates the call, and then this is the guy who does the get weather tool call and then sends a follow-up call. What is more apt tool for something like OpenCode? Get weather तो नहीं है. This one? Okay. Let's say for some weird reason, today I am feeling a little ambitious and hence I opened my Devin.
Accessibility short.
I opened Devin and for some weird reason I today feel like asking Devin what the weather is in Delhi. I wouldn't do that. I would ask it to do some coding task. But आज मेरा मन कर रहा है, तो I ask it, what weather in Delhi? What happens here? When I press enter, this prompt will reach an LLM. The prompt reached this LLM, the backend. एक event stream बन जाएगी इन दोनों के बीच में. Backend will send my prompt over here, and this guy will realize कि अच्छा, the system prompt for OpenCode looks something like this. You are OpenCode a helpful coding assistant. You have access to the following tools, and उसमें amongst many tools there is a weather tool. System prompt का part होना पड़ेगा. और अगर सिस्टम प्रॉम्प्ट का पार्ट नहीं है, इन फॉलो अप रिक्वेस्ट LLM कैन आस्क डू यू हैव अ गेट वेदर टूल एंड इट कैन रिस्पॉन्ड आई डू हैव अ गेट वेदर टूल. लेट्स अज्यूम इट्स पार्ट ऑफ द सिस्टम प्रॉम्प्ट राइट नाउ. इफ इट इज, LLM इतना स्मार्ट तो है कि इफ द यूजर क्वेश्चन इज दिस एंड आई हैव एक्सेस टू दिस टूल कॉल एंड आई नो फॉर अ फैक्ट आई एम अ डेड पर्सन, मेरे पास 6 महीने पहले का डेटा, आज का डेटा नहीं है, I should 100% do this tool call. It might first respond back with some text, hello there, let me find the weather of Delhi, and then spit out the tokens for a tool call. Or it might एकदम से ही spit out कि पहले मुझे tool call करके दो, and stop generating more text. उसके बाद वो कुछ generate नहीं करेगा. ऐसा नहीं है it is waiting कि ओ मुझे user से response मिलेगा. It literally spit this out and stopped. कहेगा मेरा इतना ही response है, इसको छोड़ के मैं कुछ response नहीं दूंगा. तो it only returned you this. And the conversation ended technically. And conversation खत्म हो गई. Now, when this tool call, the LLM returned in a specific format that it is trained on. Okay, if you have to do a tool call, return it in this format. Tool call, name of the tool call, parameters / tool call. It returned it to the backend. Backend of course said यार ये XML तो frontend को मैं क्या ही भेजूँ? It converted the XML into a more digestible format that an API should respond with JSON. JSON came to OpenCode. OpenCode realized कि oh, I had sent a question and then the LLM asked me for a tool call. So I need to now execute the tool call.
tool call front end पे execute होता है क्या? Client पे हो रहा है?
Client पे in this case हो रहा है. हाँ, यही पूछना था क्या? हाँ, यहाँ हो रहा है, यहाँ नहीं हो रहा. The tool call is happening over here.
ये एक बार दोबारा बताना यहाँ पे क्यों हो रहा है?
यहाँ भी हो रहा है, यहाँ पे क्यों नहीं हो रहा? Okay.
सिस्टम फाइल्स को लाइक बैश तो नीचे मतलब यूजर के सिस्टम पे चलेगा ना, लेट्स से कि बैश
तो वेब कॉल है ना, तो
टर्मिनल भी बैकएंड ही है तो
This is not a website. This is a terminal backend.
ये कॉल करेगा.
OpenCode runs inside here. When I say OpenCode, I mean this. हाँ, समझ गए? Sorry, website नहीं है वो. आपको लगा website है? Makes sense.
क्लाइंट साइड पे टूल कॉल होता है.
What was that?
क्लाइंट साइड पे ही टूल कॉल होता है.
Client side, but a client can be a backend. Client side पे tool call होता है, but client, the term can be a backend also. In this case, you know, even though it looks like a front end, it is technically a backend because you know it's running inside a terminal. It's a Node.js process. It is not a.
तो उससे अच्छा हम
सारे
एक मिनट.
जो API बैकएंड है हमारा उस पे ही टूल.
हमारा API backend नहीं है.
नहीं मतलब ChatGPT का API बैकएंड है.
Correct.
तो वही टूल कॉल करके फॉरवर्ड क्यों नहीं कर देता है?
You are saying, because this is a very primitive example we took, get weather. Generally, what do you think are the tools, जो क्वेश्चन आने वाला था, what tools does OpenCode actually need? File read. ये कैसे file read करेगा, है ना? तो make sense for it to run here.
So सारे tools client side Node.js process पे stored होते हैं.
All tools are over here. I don't even know if there is a way. I get what you're saying कि ChatGPT UI में तो web search tool है. तो why is it not कि even if I send an API request here, web search यहीं पे क्यों नहीं हो जा रही? I don't think there is a way to do it. There may be. We should go through the API docs, but that is just their implementation for their front end and their back end. When we are doing our own website, our own chat UI, we can't depend on their tools. We have to create our own tools, which could be the same as them. हम भी web search डाल देंगे, सब डाल देंगे. But we have to implement them on our side.
बट ये लेकिन यहाँ पे अपन लाइक वेब सर्च करता है लाइक बैकएंड साइड से मतलब क्लाइंट साइड में टूल कॉलिंग करते हैं. तो जब लेट्स से कि वेदर अपने को पता करना है कि दिल्ली का वेदर कौन सा है, तो वहाँ पे अपन कुछ सर्विस यूज करते हैं फॉर वेब सर्च.
api.weather.com.
लाइक नहीं लाइक लेट्स से कि अपने को वेब सर्च कुछ वेब सर्च वाला टास्क है.
Oh, web search.
हाँ.
How do you do web search? क्या मैं google.com/search question mark?
वैसे नहीं करेंगे लाइक एक सेपरेट उसका कुछ प्रोवाइडर होता है जो कि स्ट्रक्चर्ड फॉर्मेट में अपने को रिस्पॉन्स बैक करता है. वी विल फॉरवर्ड इट टू LLM. तो मतलब यहाँ पे हम क्यों क्लाइंट साइड पे हो रहे हैं?
क्योंकि हमारे कोड में एक्सेस उसके पास.
Hold on. One more time. What's the question? You're saying if there is a web search tool call that happens.
सभी टूल्स यहीं पे होंगे अपने क्लाइंट में.
Correct.
तो हम वहाँ पे प्रोडक्शन वाला जो एनव है लाइक
ये क्लाइंट वेबसाइट नहीं है दोस्त, वही मैं कह रहा हूँ. दिस इज नॉट अ वेबसाइट. इफ दिस वाज अ वेबसाइट देन द आर्किटेक्चर वुड लुक समथिंग लाइक दिस. My backend.
अच्छा वो अपने लिए
My backend is executing.
now my backend will execute. हाँ मतलब if you actually have a website, then your website will send a request to your backend, simple Node.js Express server. Node.js Express server will talk to chat.openai.com. Chat.openai.com will talk to LLM. LLM will respond in some
वेब सर्च वाला टूल कहाँ पे है हमारा?
my backend.
बट लेकिन वहाँ पर तो अपने को कीज देनी पड़ती है ना,
बिल्कुल
यूज करना है,
बिल्कुल।
तो वो तो फिर यूजर के पास है।
यूजर के पास कहाँ है? my backend है, डेटाबेस यूआरएल भी तो यही होता है।
नहीं वो क्लाइंट साइड में है ना, अपन जो इंस्टॉल कर रहे हैं वो सर्वर अपने साइड में रन कर रहा है।
मतलब वो कह रहे हैं कि अगर गूगल सर्च एपीआई की यूज करनी है तो वो थोड़ी मेरे बैकएंड।
गूगल सर्च एपीआई की आपको लग रहा है यहाँ से होती है? नहीं भाई, अगर वो करना होगा तो यहाँ से नया ब्राउजर स्पॉन होगा जो गूगल सर्च करेगा। वैसे अगर करना है, इफ यू थिंक ऑफ द मोस्ट प्रिमिटिव वे टू डू गूगल सर्च, व्हाट इज इट? कि आप गूगल का एक ब्राउजर खोलो, उसमें जो LLM ने क्वेरी दी है वो डालो, press enter, get the response. That's the most primitive way to do Google search. If there were no providers today, that's how you would do it. So if this guy tells you to web search, you will actually spawn Chrome over here and do it. That is the most difficult ganda way. So there are APIs, exa करके एक API है, which is used by Google also. Google also use Tably करके है ना? All of these are search APIs. Everyone uses them. उसकी एक API की होगी. That will be here in my backend.
बट उसको फिर कोई भी वो कर सकता है ना?
क्या?
मिसयूज कर सकता है।
Oh, you are saying मेरा backend is open. Anyone can hit a request to my backend.
Let's say कि ओपन कोड का है, तो मैं ओपन कोड का यहाँ पे की दे दूँगा और मैं कहीं पे भी उसको यूज कर सकता हूँ।
Okay, what you are saying is, okay, you understand this is on my AWS server. ये whatever is inside here हमारे
लाइक मैंने ओपन कोड इंस्टॉल करा है और वो यहाँ पे चल रहा है मेरे लोकल पे।
Okay, hold on. Hold on. You have installed OpenCode. पहली बात OpenCode में ये backend है ही नहीं. Let's take a different example. Let's say you go to opencode.com, which is a website. ठीक है, ये clear है? You go to opencode.com. You search for what is the weather here. Request goes to this backend. LLM tells do a web search. This guy does a web search. Let's say talks back to the LLM, get the response, returns over here. What is the problem in this approach? How is this problematic?
वो एक सेपरेट सर्वर है जो कि हमारे लोकल पे नहीं चल रहा है।
बिल्कुल नहीं चल रहा है, हाँ, of course. अगर ओपन कोड इज ओपन सोर्स एंड आप अपने सर्वर पे अपनी मशीन पे दोनों चीजें चला रहे हो तो टैबली की API पे अपनी डालोगे ना यहाँ पे, you will put your
डिफरेंट जगह पे ही रहेगा, obvious सी बात है कि लाइक वो वरना पब्लिक हो जाएगा।
Correct. So if you're running it locally, of course Tably के GitHub, let's say OpenCode was a website that looked like this. On their GitHub they will not have a Tably API. They'll just have a .env.example कि अपनी Tably API खुद लेके आओ, right? Of course. You understand? Cool.
What is this ChatGPT backend exactly? I thought we were directly conversing with the LLM.
Oh, we talked about this, right? If you directly talk to the LLM, तो आपका prompt सीधा LLM पे पहुंचेगा and you can ask make a bomb for me.
To our backend, like we have tools exposed in our backend.
We have tools exposed in our backend.
The user does some prompts.
Correct.
It hits our backend.
Correct.
We hit the prompt to the LLM directly.
Okay, when you say we hit the LLM, what is the endpoint you hit? Chat.openai.com, API.openai.com? Yeah. API.openai.com is not an HTTP server here. It is an HTTP server that checks कि आपने API की दी है कि नहीं. There needs to be an authorization layer in the middle before you hit. Before you hit a database, you do a backend check, right? Before you hit the LLM, you do a backend check.
Can't we treat this whole as an
You can, I mean, technically behind the scenes ऐसा है, but of course, I have just put them separately just to show कि, LLM responds like this, and it's the backend's job to convert this to this. In the end, there are two machines. You can think them as a single service. Any more questions? Huh? Cool. ठीक है. Let me finish this, sending in 2 more questions. All right. All done. ये सबको समझ आ गया? What if there is another tool call from the LLM here? You send it a message, it says tool call करो. You do the tool call, you send it another message, it says फिर से tool call करो. Totally possible?
Yes.
तो क्या इसके नीचे मैं एक और डालूं? So do we smell a loop brewing here? Can we now understand what the agent loop is? Very simple, While there is ये दोनों चीजें सिंपल है ना. You understand what is an conversation agent and coding agent. फर्क क्या है? This is OpenCode cursor, Claude Code. This is chat.openai.com. Not much of a difference. एक agent है, एक वो है, ठीक है? Cool. तो agent loop basically looks something like this then. Let tool calls left equal to true. While tool calls left, एक initial context है. that is, what is the weather in Delhi and in New York. You send that message to the LLM. Whatever it responds with, you push that to the context. कि ये मेरा initial message था, LLM responded with something, I add that to the context. If there is a tool call in the messages that the LLM gave me, then I create another array tool call results, I go over all of them. जो tool call थे, I execute that tool call, which could be, if for a weather API call, it will be a weather HTTP call. If for a, read file, it will be a fs.read file, whatever. And then I push the results to this tool call results array. To the context, I add tool call results, and then the while loop continues until you reach a point where the LLM does not respond with a tool call, in which case you simply log the final response. Clear? This is what an agent loop should look like. This is what an agent loop does look like. बिल्कुल. Let's say you have a continuous chat जो बहुत लंबी हो गई है. What happens at the last? If you go to chatgpt.com and keep doing it, enter, बातें करते रहो उससे. What happens when things end? Correct. You do summarization. बिल्कुल. But what else can you do? There's nothing else you can do. If you keep talking to an AI, at some point you will reach closer to the context window is when you summarize. That's what everyone does. You can do a lot of tricks over there. कि during summarization, मान लो you were asking the LLM to make a few code changes, and in the first iteration it gave you 20 code changes and the context window got filled. 20 code changes, context window got filled. Now you want to ask it a follow-up question. Before you ask a follow-up question, you have to summarize. You can do a lot of tricks in the summarization. For example, when you summarize, those 20 diffs that came, you can dump them all into different files, and in the new context, you can maintain the name of those files. That way, if the LLM ever wants to come back to or read the existing change that it did, it can. So there are a lot of tricks you can do during summarization, but there is nothing else you can do other than summarizing the context and restarting. That's what everyone does. This is the actual agent loop from Pi. If you look at it, it looks very similar. Pending messages is, if you press enter while the coding agent is working, कुछ messages pending हो जाते हैं that need to be steered in the conversation. That's why it's called, get steering messages. So if you, while it is working, if you press enter, 4-5 चीजें, they're all called steering messages. It keeps them here in memory, stalls a while loop. Let has more tool calls equal to true. Same thing we wrote over here. And while has more tool calls or pending message or length is greater than 0. कि या तो tool calls खत्म हो गए, then we will stop this, or if there are no pending messages, if the user had pressed enter before there was a steering message, then if everything is done, add the steering message to the context and continue. So ये loop चलती जाती है. This loops keep on continuing where if you look at this closer, you will see it talks to an agent, it gets the response, does the tool calls, and then continues चलती रहती है. This is a very generic agent loop. It is not a coding agent loop. It is a generic agent loop. On top of this agent loop, there is an agent class. On top of that agent class, there is an agent harness. On top of the agent harness, there is a coding agent that they have created. But you can actually, on top of the agent harness, create a essay writing agent, whatever agent that you can think of. So it's written in a very generic way. This run loop के ऊपर एक agent class है. That agent class is what is used by Clawbot or जो क्या नाम है उसका भूल गया. क्या नाम है? OpenClaw. Is what is used by OpenClaw because it's such a simple agent class which simply has a run loop function that runs, has no dependencies, takes the system prompt, everything initial context as an input, and runs the agent. तो agent क्या है? यही है बस. It's just messages, tool calls, execute tool calls, message tool calls in an infinite loop until you are done with all the tool calls. Then there might be more messages. So you just continue the loop again for the second message, continue the loop again for the third message until you reach closer to the context window of this model. Then you summarize everything where you can use a lot of tricks and then you continue again. That is all that an agent is. This is the best code base to look at if you want to just understand how agents work, but it's very simple and it's also not bad. It performs well on the terminal bench. Okay. एक चीज बची है provider APIs. As we talked about a while back, every LLM has its own API format and own messages or formats of messages, tool calls वगैरह वगैरह. So if you want to create something like Pi, where you're supporting different providers, this is a very important layer where you have to spend time. Compared to if you're building something like Claude Code, you know you're only talking to Anthropic models, so you don't really have to create an abstraction layer. But for something like this, you have to create a very solid abstraction layer. The way Pi does it is, it has a bunch of provider files that, this is how you talk to OpenAI, this is how you talk to Gemini. And all the responses that you get back get converted into a single format that reaches your agent. So your agent never sees आगे का format. Your agent loop में only a specific format reaches. And in follow-up messages, you do the tool calls. That agent loop message is again converted into a specific provider's format, and then the request is forwarded to the LLM. This sort of makes sense. They have a lot of providers. हर provider से वो बात करते हैं independently. And anything from this provider layer to the agent layer is converted in a specific format. Everything from the agent layer to the provider layer is reconverted back to that specific provider's inputs. That way, it's very easy to move from one provider to another, because all the chat history has been converted into a specific default format in the agent layer. So that if you change the model, you can just take that and pass it to the other provider. Gemini API looks like this. This is using their SDK. You can also see the rest, HTTP request that goes out. Pi just uses these SDKs, so you feel free to use the SDKs. This is the OpenAI SDK, this is the Anthropic SDK. Everyone is different, everyone's inputs are different, everyone's outputs are different. If you're creating something like Pi OpenCode, we need to support multiple models and providers, and hence the abstraction layer let us convert messages from one format to a single format. ये चीज़ समझ आ रही है? The providers have their own formats, so we need to convert their messages into a single format. This is where this providers folder comes into the picture. They have certain providers they support by default. Anthropic is one, Amazon Bedrock is one, Cloudflare is one, Google is one, Mistral is one, OpenAI is one, so on and so forth. They don't have Devin yet. So what I changed was, should ideally be committed over here, but that this is their core logic. One good thing about Pi is उन्होंने कहा है कि हम basics support कर रहे हैं. We support these models, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google. If you want to add more, जैसे मुझे Devin चाहिए था, so they have this concept of extensions. You can create your own extension, which I did. So I did not really commit over here. I created my own extension, which lets me connect using my Devin subscription. So even though they don't have a provider for Devin, I created my own provider for Devin. I added it as an extension, and now I'm using it through Pi. So I can run Pi through Devin right now, even though Pi as a repository does not support Devin. If I want, I can PR my Devin provider here, because Devin is now a big company. They raised $1 billion, 3 days ago. So there might be some merit to me contributing whatever I made over here. There are two types of providers over here. Anyone know what two types? Providers दो तरीके के हैं. नहीं, OAuth and API. You can either go to platform.openai.com, put in $5, create an API key and use it. That's an API provider. You can buy Claude Code Max plan. You can buy Devin's $200 subscription. You can buy Codex subscription. Then it's an OAuth provider, which basically means you don't have an API key. You gave OpenAI $200. They gave you $2,000 worth of credits. And all of the credits are tied to your account. You can't create API keys for it, and hence you have to create an OAuth provider, which basically means you have to कुछ headers भेजते हो आप when you talk to their backend compared to an API key. Devin similar. I have their $200 subscription, and hence I had to create an OAuth provider for them and not an API provider. Devin doesn't really have an API. Cool. Pi is the most minimal coding harness, which is why I keep on saying इसको पढ़ लेना. मतलब in 2 days I was able to understand most of it. Most simplest thing. इसको छोड़ के लोगों ने पता नहीं क्या क्या बना रखा है. If you look at a Codex or a Claude Code code base, मुझे तो नहीं लगता समझ आएगा. Honestly, I wasn't able to understand even Claude Code, even though it's written in TypeScript, and even Codex. This is like a 2-day thing to understand how they work under the hood, because the number of lines of code इतनी कम है. They also perform well on the terminal bench. इन्होंने इसको रन किया था तो Codex, Warp, some I don't know what this is, iAgent, Codex, CLI, Terminus, and then Pi. So it's like 6th on the terminal bench. So it's not like it's a bad agent. It's just very less lines of code. This is a very nice video that you can go through. This guy explains everything before you probably want to dive into the code base. But high level, it only has 4 packages. It is whatever, a turbo repo, which simply has 4 modules. All the AI logic over here that includes the providers and talking to them into a specific format. An agent, which is a more generic agent, and an agent harness that can be used as a coding agent also, that can be used as an essay writing agent also, that can be used as the agent layer for OpenClaw also. the coding agent, which is the actual coding agent logic ki, system prompt says coding agent hai. Tools are defined ki read file, write file, other tools you have access to. And lastly, the terminal UI, which is as the name suggests, a UI in the terminal so that you see everything in a pretty fashion. That is it. The TUI is less than 800 lines of code of something. I have not explored the TUI, I have explored everything else. एक provider अगर आप पढ़ लोगे, if you are able to read through one provider file, if you are able to read through the agent.ts, agent-harness.ts, mostly you are sorted. उसके बाद if you want, you can read the coding agent, but that's just using agent harness class and passing it some tools, certain system calls. So it's a very nice, it's abstracted very well. Building a coding agent on top of this or building a essay writing agent on top of this is very easy. It's so good that OpenClaw also moved to their agent. Well, that's it. That's all I had. Any more questions?
Like we are having tools in our backend and we are hitting their backend and it will hit LLM.
One more time.
We are having tools defined in our backend. We have logic of our tools in our backend. From there we are hitting.
For OpenCode or generally?
Generally.
Generally, yes. If you okay, continue.
We hit their backend and their backend will hit LLM.
Correct.
Now I have 3 to 4 tools, but I don't have web search tool.
Okay.
Now I will hit their backend and it will hit LLM and it will tell
tool call karo.
Tool calling. Now that backend will add their own tools also to my tools.
Wait, that's what I said. If you are using their API, I don't think they support that. I don't think ChatGPT supports ki I already have 5 different tools here, I will let you use my tools. I don't think so. You give it 5 tools, this guy can use those 5 tools. It will never give you web search. It will never do a web search because you never told it I support web search. It will not automatically do some default ChatGPT functions. Only the functions you give access to are the functions that is going to call. I don't think there's a way to use default ChatGPT tools from here if you're using the API. I think that's all implemented on the chat layer. बताओ कैसे पता? Before the request reaches the server, system prompt में there is a date that you just inject, No, it's not like the LLM asks to do a tool call. It is generally okay, when on the ChatGPT UI, I ask a question, it tends to add a few things about me. Okay, this is Harkirat. He's a YouTuber. जो भी इसने मेरी memory बनाई है over the last few years. He's a YouTuber. He seems like he does coding. He likes doing Rust. जैसे for example, recently I asked my ChatGPT, something around multi-threading, and it automatically gave multi-threading is a very common use case for order books. उसको कैसे पता मैं ऑर्डर बुक्स कर रहा हूँ क्योंकि पहले मैंने बात कर रखी है कहीं ना कहीं उसकी मेमोरी में ये चीज़ है इन सम फाइल यू कैन ऑलवेज एक्सपोर्ट योर मेमोरी फाइल एंड सी इट हैज़ अ वेरी बिग मेमोरी फाइल ऑफ डेली रिकॉर्ड्स ऑफ यू कि ऑन 23rd March Harkirat was talking about order books. That memory file also gets injected to the system prompt. The current date also gets injected to the system prompt. My name also gets injected to the system prompt. It's not a tool call. It is just a lot of the system prompt being enriched so that the LLM can. इस केस में LLM ने मुझे multi-threading भी बताई. It told me multi-threading. It also told me about order books. It's a very common use case. तो मुझे बड़ा अच्छा लगा कि it remembers from 2 days ago. How is that done? It just keeps injecting those things to the system prompt, including the date is always injected everywhere. So it knows कि अच्छा, it's been 6 months since I was trained, something like that. Any more questions? I don't think so. Depends. It's easier to go to, it's hard, Google Cloud is very hard to navigate, but if you spend some time, create a new email, put in 1,000 rupees in it, they give you 23,000 rupees worth of credits, use that. That's easy. Everyone just spend $1,000 and get a Gemini API key. Unki free API बहुत गंदी है. More questions? What you should build by Thursday is a great question, and the answer is the agent loop. I would say yes. You can read Pi का code base and be like मेरे को आ गया, but मैं जैसे पूरा Pi का code base independently लिख रहा था, एक-एक करके. मैंने I assumed I will use only one provider, Gemini, so I did not write any provider abstraction logic. Okay, I create a separate provider for OpenAI, a separate for Gemini. I created a single provider, but if you look at it, जो agent loop है, I sort of, oh no, this is not that. This is the Pi code base. What I have been doing is going through the Pi code base and sort of creating my own simple agent for now. So if you look at this full agent that I've created, the interfaces that you see over here are all sort of inspired from them. Are, you know, मैं वहाँ देखता हूँ कि अच्छा these are the kind of messages and I sort of add them here. And you know, this whole logic that you see over here is sort of inspired from their Google provider. So if you open google.ts, this has, you know, how they talk to Google. यहाँ से inspired a lot of my provider, which is, you know, this generate content stream function I also use, their provider also uses this thing right here. So I figure out how do they send parameters. I try to send, you know, similar parameters over here. Then as it responds back, you know, I generate everything in return. This stream function that I have created is very close to the stream function that their provider has. They have a stream Google function. I try to create a similar stream Google response function. They have an agent loop in agent.ts, or this agent loop.ts, the thing that I was just showing a while back. I, you know, put a bunch of debug statements here to understand what exactly are they doing, what are the inputs, what are the outputs, and try to basically create a similar infinite agent, a similar loop, which is, you know, this thing right here has more tool calls equal to true. A while loop, while has more tool calls. You know, send a message, whatever, and you know, if it is a text block, simply add it. If it is not text block, then, you know, push it. Model parts may keep putting the text and the tool calls. If model length is 0, if there is some response that comes, push it to the context. If tool calls or length is greater than 0, then actually execute the tool calls. I only support one tool call right now, get weather. Do the tool call, push that to tool results array, push that to the context, continue. Has more tool calls equal to tool calls length is greater than 0. So loop chalti jayegi until there are no more tool calls to execute. So if I do a bun index.ts here, then you'll see it does 2 tool calls, and I ask it what is the weather in New York and Chicago, something like that, and it doesn't work. I would assume मेरी API की में कुछ कमी है or something like that. But ideally I would expect, you know, the question that I've asked it is, who are you and what is the weather in Chicago and New Jersey and New Delhi? Please do tool calls sequentially. So I was trying to see, you know, can I run the loop more than once? Pehle it asked me to do one tool call, then I gave it a response and it asked me to do another tool call. And you know, I saw the while loop run thrice. I don't know why it's not working right now, but you get the idea. If you want, I can share this code base. But long story short, what I've been doing is just to understand their code base, trying to replicate a small version of it, and then, you know, going from there. Would be nice if you can create, you know, basically at this point you should be, if you understand this while loop, you know, जो यहाँ लिख रहा हूँ मैं, you should be able to create a very minimal version of pi, which basically means if I go to a folder and write something like this, bun index.ts, can you authentication to use cookies of you know, what are क्या कहें, so headers, something like this. If one thing that would be nice to finish before Thursday would be an index.ts file that takes such a query as an input. Index.ts has 4 tools, read file tool, bash tool, write file tool, or ecall, whatever the Pi agent has. And you give it such a query, and the tool calls are able to read the files, explore the code base, write to the files, make the changes. And the change that you get is actually exactly the same as the change that the Pi agent would get. क्योंकि loop तो आप वहीं से inspire कर रहे हो, right? तो ideally the output that comes to you should be the same as अगर मैं Pi को खोलता अभी, if I open Pi, or you know, whatever, if I run this inside the other folder and give it the same input, the output that would have come from the LLM, the changes that would have been made, should be the same as the changes that are made by my agent. So that is a good thing to finish by the end. And again, ऐसा कुछ special वो नहीं कर रहे हैं. That is the best part about Pi. It's a very simple thing that they're doing. Their agent loop is already over here. I just have to add 4 tools, and then, you know, I am compatible with Pi in terms of the features they provide. Now, of course, they support multiple providers. I don't. They have a terminal UI. I don't. Those are next steps. Step 1 is just finishing the agent loop so that it works on par with them. So that if you benchmark your agent loop and their agent loop performs the same. Then step 2 can be all the jazz around it, which is like simple stuff, full stack stuff. Only thing is you're not building a React website, you're building a terminal UI. The harder part is this, or you know, the alpha part, कह लो जो भी कह लो कि I have been able to create my coding agent is less than 200 lines of code of this agent loop, that's it. If you're building Pi, now if you're building Claude Code, they do a lot of things. They do memory, Pi doesn't do memory. They do multi-agent orchestration, Pi doesn't do multi-agent orchestration. If you look at his video, you will see he has very strong opinions about कि simple होना चाहिए, must चल रहा है. You don't need such complicated harnesses like a Claude Code. So those are different discussions we can get into. But this performs at par with Claude Code if it uses the same model as Claude Code. And your goal before Thursday would be nice to finish this, and then on Thursday we can discuss, actually dive into the code base of Pi. What was that?
4 tools are running here. Assume we have written a query, LLM say run 4 tool calls. And in third tool call, LLM starts or it goes down. But तभी तो ये for loop infinite चलता रहेगा. उस केस में हम कैसे उसको stop करेंगे?
Infinite loop कैसे चलेगा? You are doing the 4 tool calls. It comes.
2 tool calls are done. 2 tool calls are response किया LLM इसके हिसाब से response बैक देगा कि
Third tool call करो.
पर वो कुछ नहीं दिया response.
Okay, didn't respond back. So I will get this request will fail. Like if the LLM is down, while loop चल रहा है, second thing happened, third thing happened, this will throw an error. I'll come out of the while loop. Sorry. Exactly. This is the while loop, right? If the LLM is down, this function will fail. This will throw an error. You get some 500, some status code you'll get, right? So whenever you get a bad status code, this will just throw an error. You can add a timeout, right? No, we're just streaming the response. If you don't get the first token by 20 seconds, assume the LLM is down. Timeout the user. More questions?
Yeah, in line graph or like you using what's the reason Pi use?
No. Pi use नहीं कर रहे हम. We are. You're saying if you're, we're just trying to see how it is built from scratch. Effectively, the thing that we're trying to build is this agent class, which LangGraph exports. In the end, what we're trying to create is, let's say, this agent harness, or there's another class called agent here, ye class. LangGraph simply exports this. If you use LangGraph, all of that complexity is hidden from you. If you don't use LangGraph, you build all of this yourself. Most companies would expect you to build it yourself. Think of any, जैसे Rishabh की company ले लो, या any coding assistant company. Most will build these from scratch. The only reason is LangGraph Langchain की बस वो marketing शुरू से थोड़ी ऐसी हुई है कि they change things very quickly. Most times backward compatible, but they only had Langchain, now they have LangGraphs new. So just, and it's not as difficult a challenge to build a while loop, right? So everyone just owns the orchestration layer. When we say orchestration layer, we just mean this while loop. That's it. When we mean agent, we just mean this while loop.
तो भैया इसमें वो observes और evals और वो like वो evaluation करते हैं वो सब tools भी इसमें से
वो सब tools.
Like जो राधा हम जो evaluation run करते हैं कि एक agent कैसा कर रहा है comparative.
Correct. हाँ.
वो सब भी फिर कर सकते हैं.
In our agent जो हम आप कह रहे हो जो हम बनाएंगे. In Pi, yes. ये वही तो था. This is a screenshot from running terminal bench locally on this guy's laptop, where he saw कि हाँ भाई amongst the performance of everything, the accuracy of everything, Pi की accuracy was 51.2%, and hence Pi is number 6 on the leaderboard.
भैया और हम बनाने क्या?
You mean coding agent SDKs? Oh, या फिर you mean open ये वाले? This thing? There's no difference. You can do the HTTP call yourself if you want. The problem is you will get back an event stream. आपको event stream मिलेगी. Your HTTP request will get updated to an event stream. You have to write the logic to read message by message, byte by byte from the event stream, convert the byte into string, parse the string into JSON, and then do your things. If you use these guys, it becomes slightly simpler. All you have to do is this: for const await event of string. Communication is the wrong term for it. It is another wrapper on top of the communication. You can write axios.get api.gemini.com, or you can call this function. इस function के अंदर there is api.get fetch or axios.get API. That's it.
हम ऐसे बनाने क्या वाले हैं? Claude Code, Codex जैसा.
Let's start with Pi. I mean, Claude Code also is, but Pi is the same thing, right? If you see this, every coding agent is what? An agent layer. and a terminal UI. This is what Pi is. Does the same thing. It doesn't have memory, it doesn't have multi-agent orchestration. That's it. It's a very simple and primitive first principles coding agent. Claude Code has 5 different things on top. If we can get there, we'll start here. यही बनाना है मतलब.
और आपने जो कल डाला था ना वो $300 का, वो Google Cloud पे देता है ना कि Google Gap.
Google Cloud same ही चीज़ है. If you register on Google Cloud, you can create an API key. Cloud.google.com पे you can create an API key. It's the same thing. It's part of Google Cloud offering. Gemini API key is part of Google Cloud offering. If you put
मैंने Google Gemini को एक्सप्लोर किया था, वो एक ऐसा करता है pay as you go. जितना यूज करोगे
वो कहाँ से कटेगा, लेकिन वो आपके क्रेडिट से कटेगा ना.
ऑटो पे वगैरह सेटअप करा.
हाँ, आपको एक बार ऑटो पे करना पड़ेगा 15,000 का, उससे कुछ कटेगा नहीं. आपको एक बार 1,000 रुपये पे करना पड़ेगा. As soon as you do that, you will get $300 worth of credits. उसके बाद pay as you go is going to get cut from your credits.
Google AI Studio is offering the same Gemini API key which is from
The free API key will rate limit you very quickly. You'll send 5 messages, it will stop.
ओपिनियटेड जो मतलब कि गूगल API की डीपसीक का करने कोई डिफरेंस है क्या, मतलब
नहीं, कोई डिफरेंस नहीं है. इन सब में यू हैव टू पुट $US अमाउंट्स. जेमिनाई में you can UPI. That's the only reason. That's the only reason.
अगर ये जो लूप आप बना रहे हैं उसमें अगर मॉडल दूसरा रहेगा तो बिहेवियर दूसरा नहीं होगा, सेम ही होगा.
Depends on the model, right? होगा, of course different होगा. Every model for the same query will respond separately. That is why there is this, you can select a model based on your task. I might need a fast if it's a small task. I might need, Claude Opus 5.7 high if it's a tough task. That's the whole point of using different models for different tasks. Depends. That's a good question. Number one, you hope your user के prompt के हिसाब से उसका आंसर होगा. The better the prompt, the better the response. Now, if the user is not technical, all he sees is login is not working, he will write that. If someone is technical, he will write authentication seems to have a problem with cookies. Let's move to headers. Let's say you have a dumb user. So dumb user will write sign in page नहीं चल रहा, enter, and now from that you need to figure out okay, probably authentication is wrong. So you will search through the code base for auth.ts, authentication.ts, user.ts. You'll find the files, you read the files, and you'll go from there. Wait, that depends on how good your model is. Models are so good now, you give them a vague problem statement, they'll be able to figure out something like this. For a more complex issue, the better you explain, the better output you will get. Of course, for a very complex issue, if you say not working, please fix it, don't make any mistakes, at some point it will, break. वो नहीं कर पाएगा. It will try its best, but at some point it will break. हाँ, मतलब even you use Claude Code today and give it a dumb question, there's a high probability वो नहीं कर पाएगा उस चीज़ को implement, right? More questions? एक question है मेरे पास आपके लिए. Do you guys see we are doing a lot of message back and forth, which basically means I am talking to the backend, talking to the LLM, getting a message, doing 5 tool calls, then sending 5 messages this time. It returned me 10 more tool calls, doing 10 tool calls, returning 15 messages now. It returned me 5 more tool calls, 20 messages now. So don't you think token बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं लग जाएंगे?
वो भी होगा क्या, जैसे रिएक्ट नेक्स्ट में होता है कि वो वाटरफॉलिंग होती है उसमें एक बार में आता है, वो वाला इसमें नहीं होगा, लेटेंसी का फर्क नहीं होगा, बार-बार जाना बैक एंड फोर्थ.
You have to unfortunately send the full context again. There is no way around that. यहाँ से यहाँ तो आप पूरा context भेजोगे. So if your context has become 50 messages now, 1 message, 5 tool calls, 5 tool call responses, next message, 20 tool calls, 20 tool call messages responses, and then 1 more message. So let's say आपकी context इतनी बड़ी हो गई है. ये चीज़ समझ आई? I sent 1 message. It said 5 tool call करो. I did 5 tool calls. I sent 1 message, 5 tool calls. 5 tool call responses, 1 message, 5 tool call, 5 tool call responses. ये 11 messages मैंने भेजे. It said 10 more tool calls. I did the 10 tool calls. I sent 1 message, 5 tool call, 5 tool call responses, 10 tool call, 10 tool call responses. Over time वो बढ़ता जा रहा है. यहाँ से यहाँ मुझे पूरा भेजना है, यहाँ से यहाँ मुझे पूरा भेजना है. Response में I'm just getting the next thing. Response I'm not getting the whole thing back, just the next thing. Question is, unoptimal नहीं लग रहा है ये? यहाँ पे तो बहुत ही ऑप्टिमल नहीं है. LLM इज सच अ हैवी टास्क एंड यू गिव इट ये कर, उसने किया. यू गिव इट ये कर और ये कर एंड उसने किया. ये पहले दिया था ना, सेम चीज़ फिर से कर एंड देन वन मोर थिंग एंड देन ये पहले दिया था ना, ये चीज़ फिर से कर, वन मोर थिंग.
समराइज कर देते हैं कॉन्टेक्स्ट को.
समराइज करके लेटेस्ट टाइम बस भेजेंगे मैसेजेस.
दैट्स वेरी प्रॉब्लमैटिक. आप कह रहे हो समराइज करके भेज दो तो सारी टूल कॉल्स तो चली गई ना. वो अभी तो इट इज ट्राइंग टू अराइव एट दैट आंसर. इट इज अ कॉम्प्लेक्स टास्क वी गिव इट. वो आपसे 5 टूल कॉल करा रहा है, यू रिटर्न. 10 मिनट करा रहा है, यू रिटर्न. इतनी जल्दी समराइज कर दोगे तो गया, मतलब यू नो. हाँ, व्हाट इज केवी कैश?
It's like caching and LLMs had 3 things like I think key value and
Key value and query.
query. So they try to like the from that come already have the their key value there ready already.
सिस्टम और इनिशियल कैश हो जाता है, तो ऑटोमेटिक भी होता है. कोई SDK.
Yes. But what is exactly? You can set cache to true. Long story short, what happens is if you are sending follow-up messages and if you have set cache to true, all the computation that was done for your first 50 messages doesn't happen again. सिर्फ जो 51st मैसेज आया है उसकी computation happens. If this has already done 50 messages and responded with a tool call, you've done a tool call response and return back. पहले 50 मैसेज की सारी computation ये कर चुका है. इसी को KV cache बुलाते हैं. During the computation, it calculates 2 matrices very heavily, which is a very expensive part. Key and value matrices. वो इसको कैश रख लेता है यहाँ पे and then it responds back to you.
वो LLM पे कैश करता है या ChatGPT के सर्वर पे कैश करता है?
नहीं, ये बहुत अच्छा क्वेश्चन है. यहीं पे बहुत सारी प्रॉब्लम्स आती हैं कि अब ऐसा तो मान लो LLM पे करेगा, यहाँ पे तो नहीं करेगा. दीज आर ऑल स्टेटलेस, राइट? बैकएंड्स आर मेंट टू बी स्टेटलेस. डेटा का सारा डेटाबेस लॉजिक यहाँ जाता है, यहाँ जाता है. यू नेवर स्टोर डेटा ऑन द बैकएंड, राइट? और एनी स्टोरेज ऑन द बैकएंड. बैकएंड्स कैन क्रैश वगैरह वगैरह. तो if it sent a request, it reached the LLM, we can keep the KV cache alive here. Here, you know, I have done 5 messages from the user. इसका जो भी कैश बनता था, जो भी मेट्रिसेस बनते थे, let me just keep them here and respond back. But then you have to ensure कि जो सेकेंड रिक्वेस्ट आ रही है वो इसी सर्वर पे पहुंचे जहाँ पे उसकी कैश लाइव है. If it reaches a different server, then of course it is going to be lost.
And एक और चीज, वो LLM डिटेक्ट कैसे कर रहा है कि ये रिक्वेस्ट भी उसी यूजर की है जिसने वो पिछली रिक्वेस्ट, जिसका मेरे पास कैश पड़ा है ये.
Exactly. They return you signatures. Whenever it sends you a message, it returns you a hash. That is how at least Gemini does it. It returns you a hash, and when you send follow-up questions, you send that hash along. कि यार ये hash है. इस hash से वो ढूंढता है कि अच्छा मैंने पहले किया था ये computation. Let me just get all the data from there and do the new things on top. ये चीज़ समझ आ रही है सबको? One thing is KV cache. If you have a single model, it'll just retain it, and you know then it can just keep checking कि मैंने पहले करा है कि नहीं इस user से कुछ भी. But the problem becomes when you have distributed LLMs. When you don't have one LLM but multiple LLMs, but they all need to have access to some KV cache store. So that whenever a request comes and reaches a new model, and let's the first 50 messages were already computed for, it needs to get the KV cache from there, and then start computing the 51st message.
अच्छा, LLM को कैसे सोच सकते हैं कि वो भी एक सर्वर है, वहाँ पे भी
है तो सर्वर ही. एक सर्वर है जिसपे 2 फाइल्स हैं. एक .c फाइल है, एक बहुत बड़ी वेट्स फाइल है. दैट इज इट, और कुछ नहीं है.
तो स्टोर कहाँ कर रहा है? कोई तीसरी फाइल?
मेमोरी. KV cache is stored in memory. उसके when the loop runs, that is constantly calculating क्या टोकन दूँ. If you give it a query like this, what is the weather in Delhi? It first takes all of this, converts it into matrices. ये सबको याद होगा थोड़ा, embeddings सबको पता है. Takes those embeddings, passes it through the first layer of the transformer, the attention layer. वो सारी जाती हैं पैरेलली जाती हैं. दैट मीन्स 32 कोर मशीन, तो हर टोकन पैरेलली प्रोसेस हो रहा है. देन इट कैलकुलेट्स द K एंड द V एंड द Q वेक्टर्स. उसमें जो उसने कैलकुलेशन में KV कैलकुलेट करने में मेहनत करी, वहाँ से इट स्पिट्स आउट द नेक्स्ट वर्ड. अब यहाँ से यहाँ तक का KV उसने एक बार कैलकुलेट कर लिया है, तो नेक्स्ट टाइम वो फिर से नहीं करता है. नेक्स्ट टाइम अगेन द इनपुट इज व्हाट इज द वेदर इन दिल्ली, और जो भी इसका रिस्पॉन्स आया था हाई. ये पूरा इनपुट फिर से जाता है, उससे नेक्स्ट वर्ड निकलता है. फिर वो पूरा इनपुट फिर से जाता है, उससे नेक्स्ट वर्ड निकलता है. बट ऑफ कोर्स इट डजंट स्टार्ट फ्रॉम स्क्रैच. इतने की कंप्यूटेशन वो कर चुका है, वो स्टोर रहती है KV कैश में इन मेमोरी. नाउ इट्स इट्स रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी टू मेंटेन दैट ओवर टाइम इफ योर एंड यूजर इज गोइंग टू सेंड यू रिपीटेड कॉन्वर्सेशंस. दैट इज एन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर चैलेंज इन इटसेल्फ. इस पे ब्लॉग पोस्ट लिखे हुए हैं काफ़ी कंपनीज ने. NVIDIA ने लिखा हुआ है, मेरे को मिलेगा तो मैं दे दूंगा, मैंने पढ़ा था. बैकएंड्स आर मेंट टू बी स्टेटलेस. बहुत बड़ा ऑब्जेक्ट है भाई वो, मतलब LLM रन्स ऑन अ वेरी बिग मशीन. इन मेमोरी उसने बहुत बड़े बड़े मेट्रिसेस रखे हुए हैं यहाँ पे. DB में हम उसकी कॉन्वर्जेशन हिस्ट्री स्टोर कर रहे हैं, द फाइनल आउटपुट। फाइनल आउटपुट बनाने के लिए बहुत बड़े बड़े मैट्रिसेस लगे हैं।
हाँ बट अगर बैकएंड ही डाउन हो गया तो वो कॉन्टेक्स्ट तो जानेंगे, वो कॉन्वर्सेशन जो मैं कर रहा हूँ।
बैकएंड मैंने पहला मैसेज भेजा, मैसेज यहाँ गया, LLM पे गया, LLM से वापस आया, इसने यहाँ स्टोर किया, बैकएंड डाउन हो गया, मेरे पास रिस्पॉन्स आ गया, उसके बाद बैकएंड डाउन हुआ। इफ आई रीसेंड इट देयर विल बी मल्टीपल बैकएंड्स, राइट? ऐसे थोड़ी है कि chat.openai.com, API.openai.com is not one platform. API.razorpay.com is not one server. It's hundreds of servers. If 5 go down, 95 are still working. I send the first request, reach the LLM. If you store KV cache here, one, your backend की memory needs to be huge or storage needs to be huge, क्योंकि this is a very big machine. इसकी memory में वो KV cache stored है। यहाँ से निकाल के अगर यहाँ डालोगे उस KV cache को, तो पहली बात तो इसको मशीन को भी बड़ा करना पड़ेगा। A simple backend stateless server whose job was just talk to the LLM, return and respond back, now becomes a much bigger backend server. Number two, if it does crash, the user can still talk to the other server, right? But data उसका सारा यहाँ था। तो अगर डेटा स्टोर होगा कहीं, या तो यहीं होगा या कहीं थर्ड सर्विस में होगा। थर्ड सर्विस में ही होता है। You have hundreds of thousands of LLM machines. Someone sends you a request, it calculates and dumps the KV cache somewhere. In the future, a request comes, reaches another LLM, it realizes this is a repeated request. इसमें जो hash height matches somewhere, it gets the KV cache from there and continues.
ये जो मॉडल्स होते हैं, ये जैसे 1 ट्रिलियन हो गया या 1.5 ट्रिलियन पैरामीटर्स का, ये जो सर्वर पे ये जो होस्ट करते हैं, हमें वैसी ही स्पीड चाहिए, बट हमें सब ऑन प्रेमाइस, यानी जो गवर्नमेंट्स में जो काम करते हैं वो सब ऑन प्रेमाइस करते हैं, तो वो कैसे करते हैं?
सर्वर खरीदते हैं, बाय H100 5-6 करोड़ का आता है, खरीद लो, लगा लो, उस पर लगाओ, कौन सा मॉडल चलाना है। इट्स जस्ट अ बिग मशीन, दैट्स ऑल, या TPU से जो भी। द प्रॉब्लम इज प्रोक्योरिंग दैट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बिकॉज इट्स वेरी एक्सपेंसिव। अदर देन दैट, इट्स जस्ट अ मॉडल दैट्स रनिंग देयर। A lot of good models are open source. A lot of good big models are also open source. The problem is they don't work on my Mac machine. You need an NVIDIA, GPU, which is very तो कुछ नहीं कर सकते। You have to procure it. Governments have power to procure. तभी तो NVIDIA का स्टॉक इतना क्यों जा रहा है, बढ़ रहा है। They have all the power right now. Everyone wants that hardware. This one?
But LLM में 300 billion पैरामीटर, GPU साइज इतना तो नहीं होगा। मल्टीपल GPUs में एक LLM स्टोर होगी, तो KV कैश इस केस में कैसे करेंगे हम? आपने बोला KV कैश में स्टोर होता है, बट LLM में जब स्टार्टेड होगी तो एक LLM पूरा एक ही GPU में ट्रेन आ जाएगा।
You are not wrong. Computation might be parallel, but ये मुझे honest answer is I can only guess here कि if your LLM is actually 10 different machines, so how is the KV cache distributed amongst those 10 machines? I have no idea.
I think their memory is also sharded.
Probably, I would assume something like that. हाँ, मतलब I would assume कि the 10 shards are behaving like a single machine, and that's how it happens. But Google it. Basically, I don't know the answer, so I would not comment.
Like वो जो हमारा conversation चल रहा था, तो उसका आंसर KV कैश है कि growing messages का आंसर।
कैश मान लो, मतलब you don't need to know KV कैश क्या हो रहा है. You as the application developer need to know. I need to set cache equal to true, and I need to do one more very important thing जो यहाँ पे मैं suggest कर रहा था कि latest 10 messages भेज दो. Oh, तो if you send only the latest 10 messages, क्या होगा? तुम्हारी कैश ब्रेक कर जाएगी. Cache is based on a hash from top to end. अगर आप एक भी मैसेज हटाते हो, कैश ब्रेक हो गई. जो ये टॉक है उसमें वो सेम चीज़ बोलता है. वो ओपन कोड को गाली दे रहा होता है इसी बात पे कि ओपन कोड कहाँ गई टॉक. You get the idea. एक YouTube वीडियो थी ना यहाँ पे. I don't know where it went. But if you go to a YouTube video, he tells this only कि open code there you go. कि open code में ये लॉजिक है कि at some point it removes the last 10 messages or only retains the latest 50 messages. And he was saying, he asked the audience, do you understand what the problem is? And the answer is yes. KV cache breaks. The cache breaks if you start to remove the initial message. So you don't do that.
तो जैसे 50 मैसेजेस हो जाते हैं, तो सिस्टम और बाकी 40 को कैश करके लेटेस्ट 10 ये इससे ऑप्टिमाइज ही हुआ टोकन यूसेज.
40 को कैश करके
40 को समराइज कर देंगे एक मैसेज.
You could do that. Generally, if there is a lot of back and forth happening between this and this, it is trying to build up to something. Don't interrupt it बीच में. Don't.
फ्लो की बात है, मतलब वो हो गया इनका.
अरे सब हो गया.
अब यूजर के पास आ गया, अभी नेक्स्ट रिक्वेस्ट आएगी.
हाँ हाँ. The way most coding agents do is, until let's say the context window is 1,000,000, as you start to reach closer to the context window, it summarizes once. It does not बीच में summarize, क्योंकि अभी ही वो उसने टास्क कर रहा है, उसने 4 फाइल्स रीड करी, आपने समराइज कर दिया. वो कह रहा है अरे अगले मैसेज में वो फाइल का कंटेंट नहीं चला गया. वो कह रहा है अभी तो रीड करी थी, वो फिर से रीड करेगा. तो there is no optimistic way to do it right now. Everyone does it when you are reaching closer to the end of the window. That is it. There is no logic that you apply कि this seems like the right time to summarize. When the context is reaching the context window, उससे 20% पहले you summarize. Simple as that. Correct.
तो हम जो अगर एप्लीकेशन बना रहे होंगे और उसमें सीक्वेंस ऑफ चैट होगा तो क्या हमारी क्वालिटी डिफरेंट है?
Yes.
जिससे हम ये फीचर को यूज कर सकते हैं या
Correct.
डिफॉल्ट होगा?
You set cache to true. You ensure कि आप एक भी मैसेज गलती से ऊपर से प्रून ना कर दो. 50 set of messages led to a hash जिसकी KV cache कहीं stored है. If you change one of the messages थोड़ा सा, if you try to remove one, cache breaks. उसको नहीं मिलेगा वो cache. The cache is based on these inputs led to be these outputs, बीच में cache बनी. If you change the input a little bit, the cache breaks. Hence, if you have a conversation history, retain it. अगर आप थोड़ी सी भी ऊपर के last 10 messages हटाने लगोगे, the KV cache will break. You are basically sending all that input again. Your input token cost goes up. Your output token cost goes up.
इसमें responses भी
Everything. Inputs, outputs. Response कुछ नहीं. It's a very big text message in the end, which after few iterations is user assistant tool call response, user assistant tool call response, user assistant tool call response. ये पूरा cache हो चुका है. Next whatever it is generating, उसका output cost you are paying. Everything else is cached.
And हम उसको बताते कहते हैं कैसे हैं कि इस cache का काम खत्म हो गया, आपको delete कर सकते हो.
I don't think हम बताते हैं. It optimistically might delete it at some point. I don't know what the answer is. You never have to tell it.
Expiration होती है ना cache, like every 1 day refresh होएगा.
I don't know what is that logic for KV caches. Do they maintain it? That's a different cache. It's like even though it's called cache, it's very different from any normal cache. So I don't know if they retain it indefinitely. देखो अब मेरी एक वेबसाइट है chat. If I make a chat UI today and my users are coming today messaging and sleeping and then tomorrow morning waking up and re-messaging, I would want them to retain my cache. I don't think it is humanly possible for them to retain the KV cache for all the conversations that has happened. So at some point they probably expire it, but you as the user don't have to tell. They are not charging you for retaining your cache. It returns there we go. For Gemini, it returns you the timestamp also कि ये जो conversation बनी है, इसका KV cache will get expired at this point. If you message after that, your input token, output token cost will increase.
अलजेब्रा की कैलकुलेशन इनपुट कर रहा है, हम उसका रिजल्ट स्टोर कर रहे हैं कैश में या फिर
प्रोसेस, नॉट जस्ट रिजल्ट. तो आउटपुट तो एक टोकन ही होता है, बट जब वो कर रहा होता है कैलकुलेशन, इट क्रिएट्स अ लॉट ऑफ मैट्रिसेस. उन मैट्रिसेस को हम कैश रखते हैं.
मैट्रिसेस को, नॉट द सॉल्यूशन ऑफ
सॉल्यूशन इज जस्ट अ टोकन, राइट?
तो मतलब हमारे इनपुट से मैट्रिक्स तक पहुंचने का जो प्रोसेस है,
हाँ,
वो
जो
दोबारा नहीं करना पड़ेगा.
हाँ, काफ़ी मैट्रिसेस हमें फिर से नहीं बनाने पड़ते, क्योंकि द थिंग अबाउट LLMs इज when you send it an input like, god damn it, one second, there you go. When you send it an input like this, ये पूरा text gets converted to a lot of vectors, go through the LLM, KV बनी, एक टोकन बाहर आता है. Sure. Then you take this पूरा text, add sure to the end and send it again. तो जो हम बात कर रहे थे ना कि 30 मैसेजेस कम एंड देन 50 मैसेजेस गो एंड देन 100 मैसेज, वो ऑलरेडी यहाँ होता है. 100 वर्ड्स गो, 101st वर्ड बना, 101 वर्ड्स गो, 102nd वर्ड बना, 102 वर्ड्स गो. तो ये बहुत पहले लोगों को रियलाइज हो गया था कि इन द नॉर्मल ट्रांसफॉर्मर आर्किटेक्चर यू हैव टू सेंड दीज इनपुट्स अगेन एंड अगेन. ऐसा नहीं है कि अगली बार सिर्फ शोर जा रहा है, पूरा ही फिर से जाता है, तो बढ़ता ही जाता अनलेस KV cache was introduced. So that is why initial models did not have it. Very simple thing someone realized and they introduced KV cache. Now all models have KV cache. Okay, ये input पूरा जाएगा. That is what the transformer architecture expects. But यहाँ तक का काफ़ी matrices इनकी whatever KV cache is, हाँ वो यहाँ पड़ी रहती है. वो matrices retained रहते हैं यहाँ पे. When you write transformers yourself, you have the option of doing both. ऋषभ ने जब पढ़ाया कोहोट में, he has first plotted like this and then introduced कि देखो इसमें ये दिख रहा है रिपीटेड है, तो we should cache this specific thing.
तो LLM को जब हम कुछ भी एक इनपुट देते हैं तो आंसर हमेशा it's always non-deterministic.
It is always non-deterministic. Correct.
वो हम कैश कर रहे हैं तो हम aren't supposing कि वही सेव कर रहे हो.
देयर आर सर्टेन इनपुट्स, उसके बेसिस पे जो पहला वर्ड उसने निकाला है दैट इज नॉन डिटर्मिनिस्टिक. कुड हैव बीन श्योर, कुड हैव बीन एब्सोल्युटली, कुड हैव बीन डन. वो वर्ड नॉन डिटर्मिनिस्टिकली आया. बट अब ये और ये इज अ न्यू चैट इनपुट दैट हैज बिकम डिटर्मिनिस्टिक कि अब इनपुट यही है. अब यहाँ से अगला वर्ड आया दैट विल बी नॉन डिटर्मिनिस्टिक. बट एक बार वो आ गया देन इट इज डिटर्मिनिस्टिक, यही है.
बट भेजना तो ये पूरा ही पड़ेगा दोबारा.
पूरा जाता है, इनपुट्स पूरे जाते हैं हर बार.
सर आपने बताया था कि कैश आइडेंटिफाई करने के लिए हैश बनाते हैं.
यस, इज फ्रॉम व्हाट आई अज्यूम्ड बेस्ड ऑन दिस थिंग कॉल्ड अ सिग्नेचर जो यहाँ से आता है. आई थिंक ऐसा होता है, आई कुड बी रॉन्ग.
ये हैश मतलब पिछला पूरा कॉन्टेक्स्ट स्टोर करता है. अगर कुछ भी हटा वहाँ से तो हैश बदल जाएगा, जैसे बिटकॉइन में.
हाँ, आपने एक भी वर्ड पूरी तभी मैं कह रहा था कि यू नो दैट्स व्हाई आई सेड वीडियो में द वीडियो दैट आई वाज शोइंग द मेंटेनर ऑफ पाई सेज दिस ओनली कि व्हाट ओपन कोड डज इज एट सम पॉइंट prunes द इनिशियल मैसेजेस एंड इफ यू डू दैट योर कैश ब्रेक्स. अब उसका हैश कुछ और आएगा तो कैश फट जाएगी उसकी. कंप्यूटेशन बचाने के लिए हाँ. Again, an LLM with or without KV cache will produce the same output. Without KV cache, it will take slightly longer. With KV cache, it will be slightly faster. Output same ही आएगा. So what does it save you? It saves you computation here. So for the end user, what does it save you? It saves you input token cost कम हो जाती है. When you talk to an LLM, you pay per input token, per output token. पहली बार आप input tokens की cost देते हो, next time आप नहीं देते हो जो सारे cached हैं उनकी. राइट या कैश की थोड़ी कम होती है, कैश इनपुट टोकन की कॉस्ट कम होगी. दैट इज व्हाट केवी कैश डज. समराइजेशन इज समथिंग कंप्लीटली डिफरेंट, राइट? कि यू नो इट जनरेट समथिंग एंड एट सम पॉइंट द मैसेज हिस्ट्री हैज बिकम सो बिग कि अब इसके बाद भेजोगे तो हेलुसिनेट करने लगेगा. हेंस यू समराइज द होल थिंग एंड कंटिन्यू.
गूगल का हमने एपीआई जो भी ले रहे हैं वो जनरलाइज मॉडल है, मतलब उसको पूरे वर्ल्ड के डाटा पे वो ट्रेन है. हमने जो अभी बेंचमार्क देखा उसमें जो पाई यूज़ कर रहे हैं वो क्लॉड कोड यूज़ कर रहे हैं और वो भी जनरलाइज है. तो अगर मेरा यूज़ केस बस टीएस में काम करना है और मेरे को बस एक ही लैंग्वेज इंग्लिश में ही काम करना है, तो वोंट इट बी बेटर कि एक स्मॉलर.
क्या प्यारा सवाल पूछा है. आई गेट इट. यू सेड व्हाई नॉट यूज अ स्मॉल एजेंट दैट ओनली अंडरस्टैंड्स टाइपस्क्रिप्ट. ये क्यों यूज कर रहे हैं? एनीवन वांट टू आंसर और एनीवन? क्वेश्चन इज what is the point of using Claude Opus 4.5 that is so expensive? Why not use a smaller model that only understands English and TypeScript?
दूसरे यूज केसेस पे भी काम करता है. लाइक अगर किसी ने पाइथन पे एल्गोरिथम
नहीं बट ही सेइंग आपका TypeScript का ही कोड बेस है. ही से
पर एक एल्गोरिथम जो पाइथन में लिखी गई है तो अगर वो मुझे एक्सेस करनी है तो
sort of in the right direction. You हाँ?
स्पेसिफिक डेटा में ट्रेन
नहीं, it is trained a lot on TypeScript. In fact, उसकी TypeScript knowledge is better than Claude Opus 4.5.
टूल कॉल कर पाएगा कि नहीं, उसका गारंटी कहाँ से आएगा?
Tool call, it is also trained on tool calls. It is trained on tool calls. It is trained on TypeScript. It is trained on English. कम है, number of parameters कम है, agreed. But you know, do you really need these many parameters for a TypeScript project? आपको GPT 5.5, 4.5 की पूरी नॉलेज चाहिए? आपको क्या करना है स्पेनिश की नॉलेज का? इसमें तो सब है ना. It has Spanish knowledge, it has knowledge about cows and geography. You don't need that for a coding agent. So why not build a smaller coding agent that only knows TypeScript and English?
स्पेसिफिक रिक्वायरमेंट के लिए छोटा मॉडल काम
कर जाएगा. But okay, but should that छोटा मॉडल be what he mentioned? TypeScript and English ही आती हो, टूल कॉलिंग आती हो, कुछ ना आता हो. The answer is
नहीं कर पाएगा.
क्यों नहीं कर पाएगा? रीजनिंग
वो एक स्पेसिफिक टास्क पे कर सकता है, लेकिन उसको लेट्स से कि कुछ अदर देन डेटा चाहिए, लाइक कुछ थिंकिंग वाला जो कि अपने टॉपिक से लेकर के बिजनेस के रिलेटेड है.
ठीक है, दैट इज वन थिंग. बट यू नो यू अज्यूम लेट्स से द क्वेश्चंस आर ऑल टाइपस्क्रिप्ट रिलेटेड. यू नो द क्वेरीज आर ऑल टाइपस्क्रिप्ट रिलेटेड. उसको टाइपस्क्रिप्ट आती है.
मॉडल एडजस्ट करता है तो कर सकते हैं.
कर भी सकते नहीं कर सकते. जनरली if you do make a coding model, and everyone makes coding models, if you look at this, you know, it says SUI 1.6 fast. If you see any release by Claude, they have a coding version of it, they have a general version of it. In the end, all models are fine-tuned for various use cases, coding being one of them. All model releases have a fine-tuned coding version and a fine-tuned general version, whatever. That makes sense. What you're saying, उसमें होगा ये कि a lot of knowledge is also present in a Rust code base. उसको TypeScript आती है, but a lot of general things it can learn if it knows a little bit of Rust, a little bit of Go, a little bit of everything. It might help it. चल जाएगा फिर भी सिर्फ TypeScript और सिर्फ English, mostly it will be able to solve some issues, but there's actually a lot of, अब ये open question type है कि you know, can it learn anything at all from Rust, Go, C, assembly? Probably. If I know only TypeScript versus I know TypeScript, Rust, C, Go, assembly very well, I'll probably be able to perform better than TypeScript code base also. That is one good example कि बनकर कोई आया जो रस्ट में लिखा हुआ है तो it will not be able to solve it. हाँ?
अपने रिसोर्स पे नहीं चल सकते हैं.
अपने रिसोर्स पे नहीं चल सकता. What is that?
अपने मैक पे, अपने लैपटॉप पे, किसी के लैपटॉप पे शायद ना चले.
क्यों? नहीं, small model चली जाएगा. If anything, it can run locally versus very hard to run, you know, Claude or DeepSeek का बड़ा model locally. That is the benefit of it. It's a small model, it can run locally. The problem is, there are a lot of fine-tuned coding models, but they're not fine-tuned for a specific language. They are fine-tuned generally for coding. हाँ, exactly. तभी जो Claude के models हैं, they are now being fine-tuned heavily on tool calling on Bash. कि यार तुम Bash की tool calling अगर अच्छे से करने लग गए, तो तुम अच्छे coding assistant बन गए. तो everyone is now training in a way कि models become really good at tool calling the Bash tool. If you can tool call the Bash tool really well, most probably you can explore the code bases really well, you can write to the code base really well, you will become a good software engineer. So yes, this level of fine tuning happens, but it doesn't happen at a language level. It happens on, you know, other more generic things like these. Yes, that is also a very nice answer. कि what I mentioned थोड़ी देर पहले ना कि क्या करना है काउ की नॉलेज का या जियोग्राफी की नॉलेज का यहाँ पे, you know, इतना बड़ा मॉडल क्यों रन कर रहे हैं. The good thing is there's another architecture that came by DeepSeek, I think, mixture of experts, which what it does is कि if you send it a coding query, a lot of the parameters become inactive. So even if it's a $20 trillion parameter model, only 1 trillion neurons are actually activated. So it is not like you use 20 trillion worth of compute. करेक्ट. उसके आर्किटेक्चर में ही है ये चीज़. उसको ट्रेनिंग के दौरान ये चीज़ सिखाई गई है कि यू नो यू आर अ मिक्सचर ऑफ एक्सपर्ट्स. तुम्हें कोडिंग के बारे में कुछ भी पूछा जाए ना, दीज आर द वेट्स दैट यू आर सपोज टू. दैट इज द, पढ़ लेना एक बार पेपर वाला. मिक्सचर ऑफ एक्सपर्ट्स यही चीज़ एक्सप्लेन करता है कि एक बहुत बड़ा जनरल मॉडल अभी तक हम रन कर रहे थे. वी आर रनिंग अ वेरी जनरल मॉडल. व्हेन देयर इज एन इनपुट वी आर प्रोड्यूसिंग एन आउटपुट. वी वर कैलकुलेटिंग इट ऑन ऑल द वेट्स. व्हाट मिक्सचर ऑफ एक्सपर्ट्स इंट्रोड्यूस वाज based on the query there are only certain weights that are activated, and hence even in a very big model आपकी compute उतनी बड़ी नहीं लगेगी because you're only activating certain neurons. हाँ, और काउ और कोडिंग का लगा कि भैंस कैसे कोडिंग करती है तो मे बी इट रीचेज two different, you know, experts. Any more questions? All right, we call it here guys. Thank you. Thursday से पहले please एक वर्जन बना लेना.